All right. It's 6 p.m. and I'd like to open the Petoskey Planning Commission January 19th meeting 2023. It's a regular meeting in City Hall. Roll call.
Braddock. Not here. Buck. Not here.
Who's expected to be here?
Detmer.
Present.
McSweeney. Present. Meridian. Present. Newman. Here. Hall. Here. Robson.
Present. The board. So on page 2 of the December 13th meeting, third paragraph, first line, it says Mayor Murphy stated that, and it's. Can you hit your? Oh, I had it on. All right. So page 2, third paragraph down, Mayor Murphy stated is the change. And then in the downtown possible height discussion, 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down, first line. Discussion about the human scale of the downtown began, inserting the word by, so downtown began by taking into consideration. And then the next paragraph discussion then revolved around second line. It says currently height be at 45 feet, comma 55 feet, question mark. I changed that to height go from 45 feet to 55 feet. And then the last paragraph of that section, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down from the one I just did. It starts with the sentiment of the group on the second line. It says with a few foot increase, that's changed to with an increase of a few feet. And those are the changes that I had for the December 13th minutes. Did anybody else have changes or corrections? Rick?
I've got a couple on page 3. The very first line, Commissioner Newman stated that, I think it should read, stated that strike historic and stated that federal and state and insert rehab. So it reads federal and state rehab tax credits.
Okay. And you want it to say credits, plural.
Correct. There are 2 separate credits that are available.
Credits options. Okay.
And then under public comments, I don't want to put words in Justin Rashid's mouth, but I think I would say that he spoke about, and I would insert the special nature of downtown and his concerns. Those are my suggested corrections.
Thank you. Okay, so that's Justin Rashid spoke about the special nature of downtown and his concerns with the slow degradation of the town.
Yeah.
Okay, got that? All right.
If I may, I think it was more the it was not necessarily the deterioration, it was valuing retail space and treating the space as valuable and concern about single residents taken away from that space. So I don't think I heard any comments about the downtown in general deteriorating. It was more about appreciating the value of the limited retail space that we currently have. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's fair.
So we'll say Justin Rashid spoke about his concerns, about the special and the value of the commercial.
Of not taking away from commercial space downtown.
Got it.
Yeah, I think it was regarding the possible use of the back of the buildings.
Okay. I'll take a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve with the corrections noted.
Okay.
I support
Right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Everybody voted yes. So that's,
Rick, did you have the second there?
yes.
Rick did, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ed made the. Yep. Motion, Rick had the second. All right, December 15th meeting. Also, I had some minor changes. So on page 2. It's the 7th paragraph down. Discussion was had about minimizing the consolidating, minimizing. Slash, oh, I was just getting rid of the space between minimizing and consolidating. All right, and then on the update, same thing, the first line after staff informed the commission, meeting/training, so that's supposed to be a space there. And then the next paragraph, staff will send out, it should be send out, and Zach has made those corrections. Any other changes or Ted?
So I had in addition, you can see my comments on page 1, discussion. Commissioner Paul went through his list of reasons why he was opposed to the height change. What I'd hoped to do and I would like to do tonight is put those in the minutes, basically what I said from my notes. The reason is there was this question, I think a legitimate question, a little bit on city council. They were aware of some of the reasons we were considering it that was presented in the agenda memo. Then maybe not so clearly what some of the reasons were against or opposed. So I wish to put in from my notes what I believe I said at the meeting.
Okay.
Yes. So I would have it say Commissioner Paul stated that he did not feel that the city council had enough information on the planning commission action to not increase the height in the B3A zoning district and restated those reasons. That while the master plan encourages and supports economic development, it states that development is supported that protects, enhances, and keeps relevant natural, historic, social, and cultural resources. That the master plan states that there is no question that the topography of the city and surrounding areas provide views of Little Traverse Bay that create an important community resource. That the master plan goals in neighborhoods for all state that high quality, safe residential neighborhoods are to be preserved. That the planning commission received numerous concerns from residents about increasing the height in this district. That not only cited concern with loss of views of the bay, but also traffic, noise, light, and trash pollution from existing hotels, which would be worsened with height increases allowing more rooms. That the district is not just for hotels, and it already does have several hotels. That hotel occupancy appears to be at capacity only in the peak summer season, where as a city, we are already at capacity with visitors. Some examples include the traffic, inability to get into restaurants, and the extreme shortage of hospitality workers. That in the master plan outreach for public perception, nowhere was it stated that we had a great town except for one thing. We just need more people here in the summer. When considering the possibility of adding some additional hotel rooms to be used in the summer, the negative consequences for view sheds in neighborhoods outweighed increasing height in the B3A district.
Okay. Discussion? Everybody fine with adding that?
Guys, we gotta remember that these are minutes.
Right.
That's the majority of the minutes there. That's longer than all of it put together. I understand, Ted, that you want exactly what you said put in there. But I feel like we're spending a lot of time on minutes. And we're trying to capture snippets of this and I understand your concerns and I'm sure you're gonna have a response to this, but. Brevity is what we're aiming for with these.
I think that one of the wishes of the commission this last time was to make it clear to the city council what our thinking was. And I think that does a good job of summarizing it. How do we get that to city council?
Well, won't that be incorporated into tonight's conversation?
I would hope so.
Yes.
Okay,
There we go. I see no reason to adjust the minutes. It is the way they're written, but if you'd like to submit that same commentary for tonight's minutes, given it's an agenda item at the end of the meeting, that might be very appropriate.
I'm failing to understand. Do you believe I can get it in the written record somewhere so someone possibly who looked at this in the future would know what the reasons were, to be a little more blunt? The agenda memo for the city council gave reasons to approve a height increase and none of these. So a person sitting there would have trouble understanding the action of this body. I understand it was a split decision, but I think we owe it to them to explain why the majority voted the way they did.
The explanation is appropriate, but tonight's agenda calls for that discussion again, and it's an appropriate time to add those comments to tonight's agenda rather than modify the minutes from last meeting.
For the record, those were my statements.
You just. You know, it's like-
Okay. I'm not adding something that I did not say. These are from my notes. So it's just a question of, is this quite possibly too lengthy for minutes? Could no one handle reading that? I guess that's for conjecture. I'm a little bit taken back. Anyone who wishes to put on this commission wishes to put memorialize things they said in the meeting that somehow didn't get put in because we can't put everything in. I never have opposed that. It would only be if something was not said and they wanted to say, I want to add this even though I didn't say it. That's not minutes.
Well, Ted, do you think that those comments could be shrunk down to be bullet points or something briefer than that, that would be more logically able to be incorporated into these minutes?
My main goal was that we have some ability to convey why we made the decision we did, whether it's in these minutes or if it goes back to city council, but I don't know what's going to happen tonight. So, you know.
Well, I think it's appropriate to include some comments in there, but maybe they could be distilled into, 3 bullet points that kind of refer to the master plan, because everything seemed to revolve around the fact that it was in the master plan.
Well, there were other points too.
Would you be able to do that?
I mean, I would
Not
just,
tonight, but to revisit this question at the next meeting, let's say.
for the minutes, I would submit this. If people don't want to put that in because they said it, but they think it's too long, we can use that precedent in the future, I guess, and start to play that game of what's too long and what's not.
I think we have two choices. One is submit what you have. Let's see if we can boil it down a bit. Or present it tonight and have it in the next minutes. Present it tonight during the
I'm
discussion.
happy with that too. I don't.
Okay. All right, so we will wait till our discussion tonight and then you will submit.
So I will not ask that these be added into the minutes, but assuming there's some discussion tonight where it can be incorporated.
Yes. All right. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
I second.
Seconds. All in favor, aye.
Right.
All right. That passes. All right, before we move on, we have a lot on our agenda tonight. I have a statement about what's going to be done tonight at the end of the meeting, so you can decide whether you want to stay tonight. So welcome, everyone. As always, the commission appreciates your interest and participation. We'll look forward to hearing your comments later in the meeting. As a matter of information and common courtesy, however, we want to let you know that we have a full and interesting agenda tonight, including 2 presentations and more detailed discussions regarding proposed zoning changes in several districts. It is likely to be a long meeting. The final item on tonight's agenda is the further discussion of proposed height changes in the B3A Resort Commercial District along Route 131. If you are here because of your specific interest in that subject, please understand the commission will be reviewing this proposed change at the request of the city council that we reconsider our previous recommendation on the change. The commission will be trying to find consensus on whether to stand by our previous recommendation to council or to reschedule a public hearing and re-vote for a future meeting. Tonight will not include a public hearing or a potential vote on your previous recommendation. Instead, tonight we will either be declining to further review of the subject, and therefore it will return to the city council as is. Or schedule a future hearing by the planning commission and a revote. That discussion and decision by the commission will take place at the end of the meeting. With this understanding, if you wish to stay for the duration and contribute your comments later tonight, we welcome you to do so. However, if we do decide to hold another public hearing and vote on the matter, you will have an opportunity to provide your views at that time. And if we do send it as is to the city council, they also will be having meetings, and that will be an opportunity to state your concerns. Okay. So we're gonna start with new business. Agenda item 3A and new business is presentation of Housing North and housing needs in the area. We have Andrea Jacobs here. She's the Emmett County Housing Ready Program Director.
Push to talk. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be back. I am Andrea Jacobs, Emmett County Housing Ready Program Director for Housing North and the Little Traverse Bay Housing Partnership. And I've been in this role now for a year, so I thought I would check back in with you. Let you know how hard I'm jogging through this particular swamp, trying to get things done. Such a pace. It's infuriating, but we have a lot of really, really good progress and a lot of good news to talk about. So I will say, particularly something that I enjoy the most in this role is working with local officials and staff in the sort of creative space of community development and community design plans. I think from a demand standpoint, we're all very comfortable with this residential need and development pressure. How we figure out that fits into each of our individual communities, including the city, and our neighboring townships and farther out is sort of a Rubik's Cube, and it's a really interesting and creative process to help each community go through that and get really enthused and invested in how they can participate. Some exciting changes recently, you probably know, is the Housing Michigan Coalition bills were recently approved and signed by the governor. I'm not going to delve into those right now, but at risk of being overly brief, it does a couple of things. And we worked in the housing community, worked really, really hard to get access to some of these incentive tools that have been limited to more urban areas, more core communities, more blighted areas, things that, you know, MISTA had to be involved in a program in order for us to do. So I'm just going to quickly go through something like the pilot bill, which has existed, but is now untethered from the MISTA LIHTC projects. So as a community, we can each make our own decisions about payment in lieu of taxes and incentivizing the kind of development that we have prioritized. Similar to that, the neighborhood enterprise zone sort of technique has been untethered from the state qualified distressed communities. So any community in township and municipality can take a look at an area that might be underperforming, might need attention from a revitalization, rehabilitation, or development standpoint, and be able to enact some tax incentives there. And the other really cool tool is the residential facilities exemption, which very closely mirrors the industrial facilities exemption of old. And the good thing about that is that the Northern Lakes Economic Alliance is very familiar with that particular tool and will be helping us in the housing communities and also in our local areas to become more familiar with what that means and how we can think about that. Part of talking about these incentive plans is hopefully reminding us that the community, the local official, your elected officials, and also public communities understanding the role as a development partner, and not because it comes with a burden of responsibility, but because it is an opportunity for us to maintain development that's consistent with our priorities. And the first important step for us to take, and especially at the planning commission level, is having a discussion about what those priorities are in order to maybe trigger some of these engagements, these incentive programs. Now, that can be a checkbox list that, you know, up to a certain number, if you build it here and it looks like this and it accommodates, you know, this population or this income level, whatever you guys decide. Then it could, you know, trigger that participation, or you could do a scoring mechanism as well, things that are more important or weigh more heavily as far as an economic benefit for the community. So these opportunities to take on incentives, to look at tax abatements or concessions, all of those have to do with that, working from that same set of priorities. So I would love to see over the course of the next year as a planning commission, when you have a light agenda, for you to sort of forward those discussions of what are some key priorities, how do we rank them? And they don't need to be, they can be anything. They can be anything. Taking a look at some of the areas within the city limits that are opportunity zones, that are underperforming, that are, you know, thinking about your future land use and your master plan, like Old Town Emmett, for example. It could be more. We don't want to destroy what it is, but we want to make it a better community design, a more effective way to meet some of our needs. Something like the stretch all the way down Emmett Street and into Howard, which, as we'll see tonight, is really creating a new gravitational force for us and has the opportunity to take a look across the street at what I like to call Pole Barn Row and see that, especially being mindful of the way the community college is planning on growing in the next couple of years, that could be an opportunity for us to identify a space for mixed use, multi-income, full spectrum sort of community design. Because what we don't want and what we don't feel like we have room for is, you know, large isolated blocks of high density development. We have a lot of room for infill, and we have a lot of room for really great, vital and vibrant community designs that incorporate mixed use, which, you know, I applaud you for tackling some of these ordinances that really try to merge these zones together, because that's how we will get to this kind of community that allows us to take advantage of the space that we have and to provide for the needs of all of our citizens in all of the phases of their lives. So that's what I've been doing. There's a number of, I would say, hundreds of units coming online that I would like to take personal responsibility for, but I cannot. A lot of work has gone into it over the past few years, but we're just starting to see the momentum of this progress, and I'm really proud for it. And I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing all the time on this, because the pressure is really on the city of Petoskey. A big part of that is utilities and water sewer. Boy, do I try to get outside of that zone, but it's a killer. So work with what we have and take a look at where we can go. And I really appreciate your support.
Thank you. All right. Does anybody have questions for?
Andrea, personally, I'd like to learn a lot more about these incentives. And can we do that through Housing North? And is there some kind of a workshop or?
Yes.
So if you could provide that information, that would be very helpful as a perspective.
Yep. I will,
It would be nice to know what the tools are out there, even though the tools are outside of our lane as a planning commission.
right.
It's nice to know how they can be evolved by other departments and agencies as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We, like I said, are wrapping up ever more fluent and at this as it's new. But we will have a couple of webinars coming up in February and March over the next couple of months. There's a few organizations that are tackling this all at the same time, so that we can really bring this to each community and have a comfortable understanding of what it could mean for each of them. So, yep, all of that is coming up, and I'll be happy to share all that with you as we figure it out.
I have a question. How big of an area do you supervise, or
The whole county.
so Emmett County?
Emmett County.
Okay.
Emmett County, and all the way from the west side of Mackinac, village of Mackinac City down through Resort Township, and every community has their own version and their own opportunity to join in, but it looks vastly different for each of them, and they're serving, you know, a different set of priorities like we talked about. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
We're moving on to agenda item 3B in new business, the Maple Block project introduction, and we have Doug Mansfield, the owner of Mansfield Land Use Consultants, to do a presentation. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Doug Mansfield. I'm president of Mansfield Land Use Consultants. We are surveying engineers, landscape architects based in Traverse City, but we also have an office in Charlevoix. So I really appreciate you giving us what's probably one of the most important meetings and can be a really great discussion for me to have with the Planning Commission. This is a sketch plan introduction. I completely understand. There's no approval, there's no denial. What I'm looking for is if you roll over in your chairs, or if I come out with rotten tomatoes, I get the message, okay? A lot of communities don't make time for a sketch plan like this. And again, this is where we get our first instinct, especially on a very discretionary project like this, are we headed in the right direction? So I am representing Great Lakes Capital. My client, Jeff Smoke, is on Zoom tonight, listening. He has done, he's well into a very successful project in downtown Traverse City on Front Street, very complicated one, dealing with floodplain, wetlands, height issues, traffic, parking, the whole bit. So he's very familiar with all the complexities of doing development, and he heads up a group that's done work all over the nation. So there's Jeff. So Jeff has taken on a project that I was invited to visit. I think it was about this time 2 years ago, and walk through the old Maple Block building. Okay. Our office is in the Commons, the old state hospital in Traverse City. So we're very familiar with the historic values and architectural components that make a building fit those needs. So I was invited in. It was probably 20 degrees colder in the building than it was outside. It's a fascinating introduction to what has been a great part of your history here. That facility making almost a single element for 100 years is crazy. And how it functioned back then underneath in the basement areas versus the working areas. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of elements in there that would qualify as architecturally important. Okay. And there was a lot of energy, and the energy comes in the form of time, money, work, to take any of the elements out of it and save it somewhere else. So I've been involved in probably 2 or 3 other developers looking at the site. It's a wonderful site in a great town, and at a great era for recreating that environment, especially with the river being there. Jeff has held a successful option for a few months now, taken on all the elements that you need to move through to look at all the various components of financing that are out there. I will tell you the building itself is well over $1 million to just demolish and get rid of, and start fresh on that site. That's a huge hurdle to encumber, along with the value of the property, which is substantial. And then we're in this $6 a dozen egg world right now, and trying to make the numbers work with the market is, I will say, fluid at the best. We are working virtually hourly with contractors and the city staff, the county staff, and the state level to try to make this work and fulfill the need that I understand through various meetings I've been in or surrounding Petoskey. You guys have really taken on with a great deal of enthusiasm, and that's housing, workforce housing. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of the site. Right now, Great Lakes Capital has completed a complete survey of the site boundary, which sounds easy, but along that river course, it's not, I'll tell you. And along the old plats, there's not either. So there's a lot of that. So we have a boundary, a topographic survey. We've done geotechnical investigations as far as bearing capacity of that soil. Infiltration test for the stormwater infiltration. We've done a lot of environmental work, testing, the soils, the buildings, the outlets into the river, these kind of things. We have met repeatedly now with the city as our projects evolved as far as infrastructure capacity, traffic, road connection, and even down to sidewalk details, everything, lighting issues, power companies, gas, all those facilities been contacted to say, you know, is there any unknown abyss that we're going to fall into? So the due diligence that Jeff has put together is quite extensive. So we are looking at developing this property and through rezoning a PUD. Okay. And this process is very methodical and it's really good. So I'm appreciative to follow that Zach's laid out with your team. We're doing a market rate, primarily multifamily development comprised of 6 to 7 buildings right now. Those buildings are in evolution, I will say, with the cost. The building blocks that you see on this plan represent about 200 units in 6 buildings. Those 6 buildings, as they're drawn right now, and again, this is changing potentially, have ground floor parking. So on grade ground floor parking, and then 3 levels above it. The height of these is 45 feet, and I know that exceeds your area down there, but it is a number that's common in your ordinance. Okay. So then we're trying to hit a parking ratio of 1.5 to 1.7 parking spaces per unit on the site. And then we understand there's, community busing and these kind of things available. We will make room for those in this. We're also trying to make it as pedestrian connected to the other trails and to the college as possible, incorporating sidewalks, but the market really demands the parking still. One of the new things is we have to find parking for charging cars now, because we don't want to see extension cords dragged out of the windows of apartments to charge electric cars. But those are some of the new things we have to implement. The buildings set south are situated primarily, as you see them. You may wonder, why is it this close to the parking? Why are these things? All that is grouped by the International Fire Code for ladder access, those kind of things. So we're paying attention to all those code issues also on this. The ground itself, we have found that the sand qualities are good for infiltration. Our depth of groundwater is good for infiltration. You got about anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, and as you know, the site's fairly level. And so we try to create a lot of open spaces to use for bioretention areas, pollinization areas, and the depth of that, because it well infiltrates. And that's another important thing. We're trying to recreate along the street corridors, the old street lawn, and follow that. And then follow as a base design, the city grid system. So I'm very well versed in recreating that city grid and following that and what that does for efficiencies, and also recreating that pattern that's familiar throughout the city in your plats. So that instead of doing something more suburban, we're trying to do something more formal here. So far, again, with all the meetings we've had, we haven't had any issues. We'll be looking at probably anywhere from 150, 160 to 200 units on the site, as well as amenities that you'll see to the north of the site. We're transitioned to a pretty hard industrial site, the oil company, where we put some of our amenities, buffering that and against the railroad there. But we do have a retail commercial entity there that we're visioning at least a 2-story building there that would have, I'll say, higher end convenience foods, and actually recreation potential upstairs. And this is a model that we've been doing down in Oakland County, that when you have a sustainable density like the college, you have a community here, you have now not just people living in houses and leaving every day. You have probably 60% of these will have at least one remote worker in it that will be there all day long. It's a different lifestyle. We are incorporating It's not as much fun just to do your work on the kitchen table or coffee table anymore. So nowadays in the rooms, you're incorporating workspace, actually, because it's just become part of our psyche anymore. So dog parks, dogs are very important to us, small dog, large dog, separating that out. Connecting to the trails, I think is huge for us for activity. We have this commercial entity here, but we're also close to shopping and all the other facilities that Petoskey lends as a city right now. So as this project moves along, we will define in the PUD and the site plan, the building types, the density, heights, internal, external corridors, the parking ratios and such, as we move through the development. But right now, like I said, it's really fluid, and actually in the architecture, we've played with traditional, almost suburban, which is typical of the multifamily, to edgier urban feelings. So really playing and working with your staff here. Okay, we want to have this facility really turn this be an anchor for changing this whole corridor here, and then playing off the college and keeping some of these kids here and those kind of things, that opportunity. So the site, again, we're very fortunate it's flat except for a couple of divots for truck wells and some awkward. Let's try to understand what they did with different spaces on there that have pits in the backyard and things like that. You've got a very stable river floodway there. We don't want to get into that. We've got a couple of days that could be flushed. Some debris from some of the outlets has collected along the banks and such there, but you got a very fast moving river at that point. We will be probably removing 3 of the 5 outlets for the stormwater. We'll keep the other 2 not for direct stormwater, but probably for overflow. Okay, after it's cleaned out. We're very sensitive, like all of us in Northwest Michigan, about what goes in our waters. We will be doing collecting the filters, the trash, the debris in sumps and collection basins before it ever goes out. But and that's in case of an overflow only. So let's see if there was anything else we wanted to catch on. We've taken in issues of security and don't feel compelled to, create a lot. We want to make this an open part of the community, not create fences and gates into this thing. That it should feel a transition from the college to the light industrial that will remain, and then to the single family residential that's in the landscape across the river here. So we think this is a great transitional use for all those things. We've talked about traffic. At least at this point, we haven't identified any pinch points within a half mile to a mile radius. Like you said, I'm very familiar with summer traffic versus winter traffic and all those things that brings. But right now, we haven't identified any volume or train movements that's going to create a pinch point with the traffic. So trying to head off all those equations that come up through the 2 or 3, 4 planned public hearings that I know will be in front of through this process. So but I'm here tonight, just you've had it for a few days now. If you have any comments, I'm a township supervisor of 30 years myself. I've sat in your position. I can take constructive comments, criticism. Let me have it, because this is the time to get things on the table, okay, about the concerns that you may have with the project. So again, I really appreciate your time, and I'm here for anything you want to throw at me.
Okay, well, let's get the commission, like, questions, comments.
I'll get the ball rolling. Can you add a little bit more detail to the environmental impact studies that you've done? Have you done a phase 1 and a phase 2?
Yeah. So we were through all that.
Phase 2 as well?
Fortunately, to some extent, there's not a whole lot there. It's
For the industry, probably.
Yeah.
From the neighbors?
Or anything like that, yeah. So, I mean, if you know the development world, it's not always bad to have in this day and age of contaminated property. We're really searching for that. Obviously, there's blight and there's some concern because there is
different chemicals that come out of the trees, but the building was really self-contained. So and I guess the whole family should be proud of that through the years, so. Yeah, so right now, we're not finding anything that says we have to put any, a discovery out there for any of the residents or anything like that, so.
Thank you.
Carolyn? I was just curious, you don't have any of the residential buildings up in that northwest corner? Is it because of the oil tanks on the neighboring property?
Yeah, I see that use in a lot of communities. It's, one time it was a very necessary use for a community to have a place like that, and those people don't like to give up those properties. They're tightly held. So I am honestly displacing all the residential as far as I could away from that. So
Is there a fire code or building code that requires a certain distance from
not
them?
from that, the internal ones that we deal with when we do tanks on surface tanks like that, and mixing them and containment, that a lot of that's come over time. So I'm not sure how long that's been there, but
So doing the sort of community playground area up in that top corner is your sort of
buffers.
from the.
It's an interesting component. You need all those amenities. You want all those amenities. But the basketball, all day isn't always integral. So it created a nice buffer. The rest of it, the recreation wise, I mean, I focused the kind of community pool area on this green lawn that faces the street, and I think that's really cool. The rest of it, we want to be just passive area where people can find outdoor space and take part in it during the day. And we saw such an increase of during COVID of people grilling out, and the number of grills that we put in multifamily development right now is crazy because you can't do it on your decks and these kind of things. So those kind of activities have really told us where we need to be. So
Yeah, I just noticed there's, no footpaths connecting from the far southern part of from the lot up to the playground. So I was wondering maybe, more pathways connecting along the west side so kids don't have to go across the parking lots on bikes and whatnot.
great.
But other than that, I think it looks great. I mean, this would be a great addition to our city.
Great.
Charlie?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on parking. Does this layout that you presented to us, does that also reflect the parking on the first floor of the buildings? Because this looks like a lot of parking outside of the footprint of the buildings,
Yeah, it really does. That's only like 1.6 parking spaces per.
including the parking underneath.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, parking underneath isn't really efficient. It's one of those things that actually some of the funding mechanisms who are based on core communities will pay for. So, that's what we're trying to figure out, is that the number of parking spaces we get underneath there, because I have 2 stairwells and an elevator core and a lobby on that floor also. So it gets cut up a little bit down there, meeting all the fire code issues. But right now, we're really playing with that because we think it's rather than having more garages that people want in a multifamily environment, that would satisfy that part of the market. Okay, so that and other people say, I don't want to pay that $50 or $100 for a garage extra. So that kind of satisfies that market without creating all this accessory structures. So.
Rich?
Yeah, I would agree with Carolyn that it would be nice to see more walking pathways throughout the whole area. And also maybe make it more accessible for bicycles. I don't see a whole lot of accommodation for that. Actually, they're small, so they don't show up on this site plan. But even by the entrances where you see the driveway into the parking areas, there's bikes there. There's bikes on each side of the building. The room mostly though with the value of bikes. In these occasions, they're going inside. Bikes aren't $100 puppy anymore. So they're too valuable to leave in the common area. Well, I don't mean just storing, but making it easy to use a bike.
Okay.
So that, you're not
worried about being hit with a car or something. Your developer's a former Olympic bicyclist, so good deal. He's gonna hit me hard with that. All right. Thank you.
Done.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. Maybe just a little follow-up. I was gonna ask you about the first floor parking. It sounds like you kind of answered it. There may be some funding involved, and certainly there's some market characteristics that push you towards that. But I did seem like there was a lot of spaces. I thought there was roughly 300 outside the buildings, and I was gonna ask you, do you need the first floor parking? But it sounds like you're gonna say you probably do.
At least we want to play with this. And the one thing about this plan that I'm not happy with, and that's why we're looking at some other unit type or building types, is I didn't want to end up with a single roof plane. And we want to interject this, skyline into that. Some of the other buildings we're looking at won't have that option. Okay, so we don't want this to be a project. Okay, we want it to feel unto itself and individualistic.
Because obviously, if you didn't have that, you'd have a story lower building.
Now you start doing carports. Yeah, you do it story level, but you're also going to demand for carports, garages, and those kind of things. Because again, it's not, these people are in transition. This is a lifestyle they've selected to live in this equation, which is a change from we're still dealing with the recession, where nobody wants to own a home like they always wanted to, like mom and dad did. So they have stuff. And they need a place to put their stuff, as George Carlin, I think, said years ago. So, so it's not, a lot of times it's not much about putting the car somewhere, it's about putting their stuff somewhere. So there's a need for that. So
is there anything below ground? Is there a basement or?
No, we looked at actually, when we started the project, we looked at going about a half story down in the gradient with actually the garage structures, not completely down, but working with the contractors, they said if we can bring this out of the ground and still have the on grade on parking, the construction numbers just work a lot better. So actually, when I had that, I was able to stay under that 45 feet and get another story of units. So the things became really efficient when you're talking elevators and these kind of things. But right now, like I said, everything's fluid trying to make these numbers work. So
what about on the roof, 4 stories, 45 feet, will there be mechanicals?
The mechanicals some would be on the roof for some types of the buildings surrounded by screens, is what we do. So, but then only 3 or 4 feet. And when I say 45 feet, I think I can keep all that parapet down below that with a flat roof structure. And so.
Okay, I didn't hear you talk about the pricing of the units, the incentives is, but I understand that's part of this equation that there may be.
Well, I can tell you, we want to be in that 80 to 120% AMI, that missing middle. I mean, that's what everybody's trying to hit. That's not because of a financial equation or anything else. That's just where all the developers are headed, and we need to be in that market. So that's why I can't, and I don't think the owner will be able to tell you that for some time. He'll have to make certain guarantees on certain numbers of units if we get involved with funding, but I just can't tell you where they'll be. But I'm going to say right now, due to, I mean, we talked about incorporating I'm going to say LIHTC, funded project, that 40 to 60 AMI, which MISTA always played in. But even though the railroad tracks aren't really utilized, MISTA doesn't like to develop communities around what potentially could be a railroad corridor. Okay, so there's certain hindrances to those check boxes that we have to deal with there. And so we're not trying to get down in that market. It's really market rate, but without developing anything that would be exclusive or luxury type features to them, even though you're on the river. And that river is going to transition, and our testing of all that came up really clean, even along the banks and such. So I'm really happy about all that. So
the open spaces are always important. You sound like you wanted to keep them fairly open. Would you consider? I mean, some people are going to want maybe picnic areas or tables or benches at some point. I don't know.
Actually, we've created that whole walkway will be covered with benches and awnings and those kind of things there. So that each one of those is a grill, so we'll center that in the final design, you'll see that. But I think outside, it is so important in northern Michigan, you know, so.
So my last one is on the dog park, which is, do you envision that developmentally for the people there, or do you think it's more of a community?
I think this is primarily for the utility of the people that are in this community here. Dogs became a big part of our lives again, and that's something, if you got one during COVID, you've got them for 10, 15 years now. I've got one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Rick? Yeah, I'm real excited to see this development. I
Good.
think, being able to turn this industrial property into a residential development is just awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited that you're pursuing this. And I think the way you've chosen to distribute the uses on the site make a lot of sense. With the commercial and recreational things up there at the north end against the Pacific Pride gas depot and along the railroad track. And keeping the commercial close to the street makes sense. So it wouldn't potentially be just for residents. I
Right.
guess anybody could come in and use whatever commercial business was in that building. So the visibility from Standish is important. And I like the variety of the orientations that you've done with the buildings, the east, west, north, south. I think that will, break up the development in a pleasant way. I guess the negative impressions I have are that I wish there was a greater diversity of housing types.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm hearing you say that you sort of need to maximize the number of units, maybe in order to make the whole thing fly financially, but I think, maybe consider an option to look at the 4 buildings at the top there that cluster around the pool and office, and then maybe think about those 2, the triangular portion of the site at the south end where the 2 separate buildings are. Could there be another housing type that would work in that section and even.
If I can, yes, the market is changing as people want to stay in this more, and I will say. I'm doing 1,200 units in Traverse City on a project. And actually, we've gone to what we'll call garden style homes, single family, detached, 0 lot line kind of stuff. To townhouses.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, kind of townhouses.
And it does create another social equation, and actually the meeting we had 3 or 4 weeks ago with the city. And when we talked about changing these other units, that's going to create some little pockets. For development where a quadplex of townhouses could fit, or maybe 2 quadplexes of townhouses, and Jeff has actually developed that in a couple of different projects that he's been in, so he was excited about that. So it's a cost, I mean, every time you do something like that, but we think the social equation that it creates might be far-reaching in terms of age and where they're at in life, both financially and growth wise. So, yeah, so we are looking at that.
Be on that property or would it be?
Stay on that property,
Okay.
right? So, yes, we're well taken.
Okay, good. I was a little taken aback at first, and thinking about the prospect of so many cars on that property. There's a lot of surface area lots, and then to think of being able to look everywhere at the buildings and seeing nothing on the lower story but car storage was a little discouraging to me. But I mean, I kind of hear where you're coming from in terms of maximizing when you're going to put in stairwells and elevators and things to try to maximize the height to really be able to defray the cost of those kind of.
In this situation, one of the concerns that the neighborhoods always have, which I'm a little bit isolated from that still, is well, are they going to be parking on my street? Now are they going to be taking up my parking? And are we going to be, how are we going to have the fire departments always get worried about circulation? So I think the 1.5 and 1.5 again is where the state likes to be parking wise still. you know. When they're any part of a funding mechanism for this, so you're checking that box again, there's a lot of it. It's interesting you say that because I've been doing a lot of work in the area in some of the suburban townships and then not taking anything away. They don't have on-street parking like the cities do and stuff like that. But they're very much, you know, you're gonna hit that parking need, you know, and so if there's a variance from it, we're willing to play with that. I mean, so, you know, we're doing communities now with virtually no parking if they're in the core, you know. And they have to go and pay if they have a car, I guess is what we're doing, but I think it's still a part of our lifestyle, so.
Well, you know, I think at least from my perspective on the planning commission, if there was a way to reduce the number of parking spaces that were developed and not impact any of your financing options or approvals and such, I certainly would be in favor of trying to decrease that from my standpoint. And then just a couple more comments about the site itself. I think I'd like to see you take better advantage of the river edge. I mean, I think an interesting thing would be to try to develop a dock along the edge of the river. Where people could put kayaks and canoes in and out. And kids could go down there with a fishing pole or something. You know, I think that would be a super thing. That's a beautiful section of the river right there. And
it has some little eddies in it actually along that coast too, where you could do that safely.
I think that would be a really nice amenity for that.
You're gonna stand by me when I present that, right?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I would.
Okay.
And yeah, a couple of other commissioners talked about the trail along the river. I think it's important to try to maintain that. Maybe there's a more informal trail. You know, you've got the paved trail. It's kind of like in the Bay River Valley here. We've got a paved trail that goes along the river valley, but on the other side of the river, there's a gravel trail.
It's probably just part of me not knowing your commission. Because I actually stayed away from that river, like to meet the setback. You know, I want to be able to say I met the setback. Not that we'll encroach on any integrity embankment or anything with pass. But the human nature wants to go to water.
Right.
And if you don't provide them a place, they'll find a place. And that's what damages the river.
Right.
I have the Boardman River in my township, you know, and it's a natural river. So I completely respect what you're saying. So.
Okay, good. And I was happy to see all the landscape materials that were shown in the plan here. I think that's an important part of a site development concept like this. And I'm glad to hear you mention the idea of street trees along Standish, because I think that would be a huge benefit and a huge asset to the development to really have a strong planting of traditional street trees along the Standish Avenue edge there. So I like that idea. And then the only other site thing I was thinking about was what about some kind of community garden sort of area that would, you know, people are more interested in kind of getting outside, a lot of people these days, and planting gardens. And could there be, is there space here that a community garden could be developed that would have space that would have geofencing around it, you know, to make it a real viable garden?
I think we definitely have the space to do that. I've left a lot of passive areas there. I've had success stories and messes with community gardens and arguments. Somebody takes it over, or you tilled my tomatoes, or, you know, I mean, they take ownership in it really quick.
That's true.
So, but you know, we definitely have space for that.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you.
Hold on. Doug, did you have anything? Okay, Matt?
No.
All right. All right, go ahead, Charlie.
Let me take it in a different direction. If you had another floor, how would the economics look?
If I had floor and I had flexibility in parking, because that, you know, every time I had a floor, that's another, you know, 12 and 18 parking spaces. But if there was that discussion here where I could fit it on the site, it would be beneficial. I mean, it just, when you're, especially on the larger buildings, you going up is far cheaper than spalling out larger.
Well, and the reason that I make the comment is it is a PUD. And it is in a lower area relative to all of the environment around it. I don't think there would be any neighborhood concerns with a slightly height, another story in that area. And considering you're thinking about putting elevators in each one of these buildings, that's an expensive
Yeah, it
proposition.
is. You know what? We'll test it, and if you're willing to at least look at it, it'd be great.
Or picking up on Charlie's idea there. Maybe take some of the buildings up an extra story, but take the other ones down. a story.
Right,
So we've
right.
got a mix of 3 stories and 5 stories.
Yeah.
That might be a really nice.
The 3 stories have more individual walk-ups. There's a psyche about walking through an internal corridor in apartments. I enjoy that social equation rather than the isolation of having these just doors at the end of stairwells and you get to know the people. But northern Michigan isn't really attuned to urban lifestyles, but we're seeing this influx of people from all over the world come to our neighborhoods, our beautiful cities, and want to live here, so I'm going to challenge that if you guys, are willing to be open to it. So I appreciate that.
I can't speak for the rest of the commissioners, but I'd be interested in seeing your evaluation.
Okay, all right.
Okay, anybody else? All right, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for making time for me tonight. It means a lot. I really appreciate it. We'll be working with you soon.
Yeah. All right, moving on. All right, we are moving on to old business, agenda item 4A and old business, discussion of proposed tax amendments. The text amendments to condense zoning districts, RM1 and RM2 multifamily districts to one RM multifamily district. So at this time, I'll have Zach give an overview.
Okay, so this time around, I tried to tease everything down. I know it was a lot of information the first time. I tried to really tease it down. Really, I think the primary discussion here revolves around obviously the setbacks, the height, the dimensional stuff. On the back side of that page there goes into the special condition uses. So those are really the only differences. So I think we frame conversations around that. I think that's how we're gonna come to a consensus, figure this out. So if you guys have any other questions, happy to answer them.
Well, I had a possible refinement of the intent statement of RM, multiple family. And wondered about maybe trying to include references to other commercial and mixed use districts so that, this first opening paragraph would read as it does for the first line, halfway through the second line, and then where it says such as the downtown area and then strike lower density residential because that's referenced in the next sentence. And in place of lower density residential, have it read to say in close proximity to higher traffic and pedestrian generators such as the downtown area and other commercial and mixed use districts. And then it would go on to say, as it does now, the zone is designed to provide a zone of transition between such generators and other residential zoning districts. Because I was trying to think of what other pedestrian generators are there besides downtown. And, the lower density residential doesn't, I don't know that that's a real traffic generator, but other commercial and mixed use districts that are nearby would be.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Anybody have a comment on that? Or any additions?
I like it.
Question for you, Zach, on page 2, the principal use discussion there, section 603. Is the second number 2 down there. Was that a mistake to include that second number 2 when it's already number 2 up above?
Yeah, the numbering there, so the 1 and 2 would have come from the RM1. And then when it starts to 1, 2, and 3 again, that would be from the RM2.
Oh. Well, kind of the number twos seem to duplicate each other, so
The one has more information in it than the
I
other.
would suggest that those be consolidated, because basically that's what we're doing, we're consolidating the districts.
But the difference is on the one for RM2, it adds residential care and treatment and sheltered housing facilities.
Yeah, but there won't be any RM2 anymore, it'll all be just RM.
I know, so do we want that to be part of the new RM? I would think we would,
Well,
since
that's-
it's
I
already
thought-
there.
I thought that's why, what he's proposing here is this whole page 2 would become RM, right?
This is just all the special uses together. There wasn't that many, so I just put them all on there again. I know that's not currently
Mhm.
the idea here, but there was not as many. I think what you're saying is that first number 2 could be crossed out,
Mhm.
and we would just adopt that second. Is that what I'm hearing right?
Well, I guess, or have them combined in some way, yeah.
Yeah.
And then shouldn't they all be just numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever?
We all-
Okay,
numbering-
okay. So this wasn't necessarily intended to be the final
No.
language.
No.
Charlie?
Okay,
Well, the question is, are you recommending that we just take this language and run with it, or are you asking us to go through it item by item to see if we want to preserve it?
That was my intent. Because there was just a few of them I figured we could go through. I think none of these to me seem fairly egregious, but I wanted you guys to go through each one. Like there's nothing.
You want to start with that? Just.
yeah, I
work on
would
that.
add, I wondered about congregate housing, should the term congregate housing be included in here anywhere, along with assisted living, convalescent and nursing care, congregate housing where,
We don't have a definition of that in the ordinance. That I'm remembering.
It's kind of a housing type that's out there, maybe we should have a definition for that.
We can certainly look into that if that's the sentiment.
Do you know, what is the definition of congregate housing? Just more
Well, I think,
people gather and,
yeah, it's kind of a cooperative arrangement where, several adults or several families are together in the same building and they share common kitchen and living facilities and
okay.
dining facilities, but they have their own bedroom spaces and bathroom spaces. Maybe, I guess there are different models, but that's the model that
It is not in the ordinance.
Not that I think it kind of falls, I would place that under the boarding houses definition. There can be some differences in there, but. If one came forward to me and it said congregate housing, I would present it to you guys as just, this is a boarding house.
okay.
is that something we want to update? Change boarding house to congregate housing, if that's,
If you guys wanted to play with the definition that, I would recommend we just tack that on to do that next time. Focus on this, but if that's something, we can talk about it next time for sure.
okay. I had a question about residential care and treatment and sheltered housing facilities.
Cynthia, Carolyn had just one more thing there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In the ordinance, though, we have a thing that says boarding houses have to be so far from each other, right? So I don't know if we want to put the congregate housing in with boarding housing for that reason. I don't know. They should be combined or not.
Yeah, I wouldn't see any reason why they would need to be separated by any distance if there were multiple congregate housing projects.
There must have been a time in the city history when they felt there were too many boarding houses.
So. Just so we're clear before we get to your Cynthia, I just want to make sure, so. Are you guys thinking you don't want to combine them then, or you do? Who's still spinning?
I just want to have that stipulation for boarding housing.
You're saying not have it as a special condition use at all?
You know, have it as special condition use, but maybe not require that it be 400 feet from any like facility.
Oh, I see.
And also there are a lot of lot size requirements that kick you to be allowed to do a boarding house or not. So, I mean, how many, I was curious, I had a question in here, like how many lots are we looking at in these districts that are actually over 5,000 square feet? Like, you know, like the boarding house one is 7,200 square feet.
I
So,
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I know I do get, I had one today. Somebody asked about, can I do a boarding house here? And the answer was no, the lot was too small. They also well, the lot was too small because they wanted to do 12 people, I think it was quite a few people. And I was kind of glad to have that regulation personally, because with that many people, you know, there's gonna be a lot of movement, there's gonna be a lot of people coming in and out. You'd want a little bit bigger lot, just as a neighbor. That was my thinking.
So
what was the size of the lot in question today?
It was that 65. Which is, I would guess, offhand, pretty average for the RM2.
But wouldn't parking require, I thought I did. Sorry. Wouldn't parking requirements also be a limiting factor if you did without the lot size?
Correct. There's
That's almost gonna dictate the lot size.
It would take care of itself.
So I'm not sure what the lot size, sorry, I'm not sure the lot size is even necessary. If we're trying to streamline things.
And what we could do. Unless, so does anybody have?
Oh, Zach, yours isn't, I'm sorry.
Any of these uses anybody outright gonna not agree with?
Well, that's what we're debating.
Okay, well,
We started at the.
I asked because if we're gonna hash out each one as far as the definition, we're gonna have to go back into the definition section. I would say, well, let's just, yeah, that's the use, we'll figure out the definition portion.
Okay.
Later. That's it, you know, if you guys wanna knock these out, let's do it.
So why don't we start with number one about nursery schools, daycare, nurseries, childcare centers. Not including dormitories or family daycare homes and group daycare homes. 7 or more minor children. I do have a question. We updated for nursery schools. I thought we did. And we got rid of our requirement of a certain, you know, area of 1,200 square feet. And just left it as what the state of Michigan requires. Did that happen when Amy was still here? So we did update that and simplified it. I thought that passed.
I can look into that.
So I think that provided that for each child so cared for, there was provided and maintained a minimum of 150 square feet of outdoor play. That and then I don't know if even the shall be fenced or screened from any adjoining residential land with planting. I don't know if we want to keep that in or if that just whatever the state requires. Do you remember if we kept that in?
That's my recollection, is that we just deferred it to whatever the state requirements were.
Yeah. So it's just that we allow and we list that allowing of.
Because at the end of the day, these are special use requirements that are going to require review by the planning commission. We can kind of make the rules as we go along for those kinds of accommodations for specific parcels.
Well,
In accordance with Michigan law.
right.
Within reason, there's stipulations we have in the ordinance for those special uses, but yeah. There's a little more latitude that you guys have there.
Okay. So does anybody have any objection to any of those uses?
Are you talking about just number one now?
Number one, we're only talking about number one.
First.
Correct, the top one, top first, number one. Okay, let's move on to We'll do two, but we're gonna jump down to the other two. Because it has more uses than the first one, which it says assisted living, convalescent nursing care, residential care and treatment, and sheltered housing facilities. Not to exceed 6 occupants per structure. No such facility shall be less than 400 feet from any like facility. And Rick mentioned that we might want to add boarding house and congregate housing. So,
Boarding house would be number 3. Right under it.
Or suggesting getting rid of that.
Oh, getting rid of that together, altogether.
Congregate housing is a different animal, but.
well, I'm
I'm not
for
sure.
number 2, do you want it, we don't want to include boarding house and congregate housing, we're only talking about assisted living, convalescent nursing care, residential care and treatment. And sheltered housing facilities, I don't know if we have a, are you referring to sheltered housing being a homeless shelter?
I think that's likely what it would fall under.
Should we call it temporary sheltered housing? Or,
I think that's part of it.
so I don't know if we want to.
Sheltered housing, a community service facility offering temporary refuge for persons in domestic transition, including their natural or adopted children, living together as a group of individuals in a single housekeeping unit.
Okay. Well,
That's just.
but it says family, and I mean, it's a lot of individuals that aren't related.
Yeah.
It says that in there.
Well. Community service facility offering temporary refuge for persons in domestic transition, including their natural or adopted children,
Okay,
living together as groups of individuals in single housekeeping
Okay.
unit.
all right. So I guess,
I think we should change this term then,
Yeah.
because it's a defined
Right.
term.
okay. And then. I know that city council went through a lot of effort. That they wanted to require not to exceed 6 occupants per structure.
Recently?
Maybe 5 years ago.
Hmm.
So, and then no such facility shall be less than 400 feet from any like facility. Do we agree with that assessment, those 2 requirements? So do we agree to keep everything, the limitations of 6 occupants and 400 feet from any lakes facility?
I guess if we didn't throw the term congregate housing in here, I would be comfortable with it. And it seems like we need to do a little more research on that term anyway, before we maybe incorporate it somewhere into this. So I would say to skip that for the moment and just move on with what's here.
Okay.
Well, is there a reason for the 400 feet? I mean, is there a justification to leave that in as opposed to just cut it out?
Well, I think that maybe it's in part to preserve, because these can be in residential areas,
Or in
to
one
keep
place?
them not consolidated,
Right.
have them interspersed might be less of an impact to overall.
Mhm.
So keep it in.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. All right, now we go back to number 3, offices for executive or administrative occupations, including legal, accounting, insurance, finance, or similar professions in existing residential structures with the following conditions. So I don't know if we want to go step by step. Do we agree with those uses? That all those should be in RM2? Okay. First, I want to just, do we agree, executive, administrative occupations, legal, accounting, insurance, finance, or similar professions in existing residential structures with the following conditions? So would a lawyer be able to have a,
Sure.
would a dentist be able to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you agree with that, Zach?
Shirley, you have I thought we had a definition for dental. You got it right in front of you, so that's,
Well, we have had dentists in RM.
Yeah,
neighborhoods, so let's see. I should charge extra.
maybe you got a special place at the table.
I do not see dental in the definitions.
There you go. Don't trust the memory.
With their executive or administrative occupations. So it's office workers. Is basically what we're saying here. Yeah,
I've got
there's an office worker.
We've got dental falling under medical, under clinic,
Okay,
and under a lot of office
okay,
uses as well. So yeah, I would fall under there.
okay.
I have a question about the first line, office. For executive, blah, blah, blah. It says, for similar professions in existing residential structures. What if somebody were gonna build a new building? Should the term existing residential structures be stated here?
Rick, as I read that, the intent would be that if there were a new build, it's probably going to be a commercial building, and we want that in a commercial area. Then I guess the follow-up question is, okay, well, what if they're gonna build a house and do that? Well, then I would have to fall on the existing. So that goes back to your question of, is existing really what we want, or do we tweak that language to say, we just want it to look residential?
We could just delete existing and just say finance or similar professions in residential structures with the following conditions. I think that solves the problem.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to the first condition. The property is immediately adjacent to or directly across the street from a business zone parcel, which of course we're going to be changing B1, B2, B3. So you can't have an executive administrative office in the middle of a multifamily, the new, what is it, MR district? Unless you're adjacent to the a different part of zone. So I think that makes sense because you're allowing it in the outer areas. Again, it serves as a buffer for the inner housing area
Transition.
So that B1, B2, B3 will have to be changed. All right,
Why not just delete them?
well, I do think that they should be added. Don't you? That should be specific. Which ones they have to be adjacent to? Or just business zone is going to be self-explanatory.
So if you take that out, you're essentially adding the B3A, B3B, you're adding more districts. So the question becomes, do you care about those districts being incorporated or not? I would say taking it out would be fine. There's not, off of memory, there's not that many adjacent RMs to those two districts off the top of my head. Yes, there are some. But it's not a majority by any means.
Okay, is that a consensus there? Delete it and let it be all. All right, B. The property is within 1 block of the parking exempt district as defined in section 1704 of the zoning ordinance. So these conditions, do they have to comply with all of these conditions, all of them, or do they? Okay, so the property is with 1 block of the parking exempt district really limits where these can be.
Yeah, that would have to be eliminated. We're combining these RM districts because. If you look on the zoning map, if you look at where all the.
Hit your button.
If you look on the zoning map and you look at where all the RM1 and RM2 districts are, a lot of it is, most of it is more than a block away from the downtown, which is the parking exempt district. The CBD is the parking exempt district.
Yeah, that would just be surrounding you'd be across the street.
So B really has to be eliminated. That requirement.
Is that why you think that requirement's there? I don't,
Well, I'm kind of wondering if you talk about, we allow people to have small businesses in their household, there's conditions, and one of those conditions is you can only have 2 cars, I think. You can't have a lot of coming and going because that disrupts the neighborhood too much. Well, if you're talking about in offices for executive administrative occupations, they're probably going to have more than 1 employee. So the activity is going to be more intense and the parking requirements are going to be more intense.
Which goes to item C.
Okay,
So, but if it has to be adjacent or directly across the street from B1, B2. Wouldn't that be within 1 block of it wouldn't be?
no, only the central business district does not require parking.
Right. Oh, okay,
So it's just the downtown.
okay,
So if you look at your map,
yeah, just the.
there's that little red
right,
spot, it would we'd only be allowing these.
yeah,
It'd be a small, Michigan, it would be Michigan Street. And little bit of East Mitchell Division. Yeah, it would be we'd actually be talking about a pretty small area that we allow it.
yeah,
And it does seem like, you could do that in these, what it might become consolidated to mixed business. There's areas that look like that would work fine if they, abutted a. So. The thing is, you do have to evaluate the parking.
I think with these uses, in particular, I think these ones are called out intentionally because. Yes, there's patrons there, but it's not a convenience store. You're getting 2, 3, 4 a day at most, I would imagine. So I think that's very intentional why they included those uses with that, because they are lower impact. And then as we're walking through this, it is limited by having it just within that parking exempt zone, so.
But do we want to limit it that way? Do you recommend that it be limited?
I would say with the few patrons and with these business options here, these office administratives. I don't see those being terribly egregious, 4 people a day, that's your mailman, that's your UPS man, that's your, FedEx, it's just like a delivery, there's people coming in your driveway every day.
But Cynthia, I think, did raise the point that these will have employees, so the number of employees that they have within a given space, is that going to be reflected in their excess parking requirement?
Parking requirement.
Is it going to be tied to the number of employees that business has?
It's based on the floor area. For offices.
Right. But can a multi-family area accommodate parking for this type of business? How do we calculate that?
Cynthia, I had a question too. I mean,
Yeah.
to the extent that someone we limit it less in taking out that language, potentially homes get turned into offices in a residential district and you lose housing stock.
That's a good point.
So great for, I can run my business here, but
Right, so do we want to keep it that it just is around for now? Why don't we just keep it the central business district and then let's keep an eye on it, kind of evaluate. Let's find some places that are around it that exist now and how many employees and what kind of clientele they have coming and going. Maybe it's not appropriate for other areas.
The way that it's written, and the question was asked earlier, Do they have to comply with all of these requirements? And the answer was yes, the way it's written, because it says with the following conditions. Subject to modification by the planning commission. I mean, since it is a special use and it does have to come to the planning commission, can we waive some of these requirements under certain circumstances?
We can waive parking requirements up to 25%.
But some of these other requirements, I'm thinking like the location.
All right.
I just would ask the city planner where you'd end up with. So if you like the flexibility, which I hear you saying, then the flip side might be the legal side to it. Someone you didn't allow to do something and then the next person you did. But we can do that because, and then the question legally becomes. Is that fair treatment under the law?
So you have your latitude. You have your latitude in the parking requirements. The location is not one you have latitude in. That's one where within that one block of the parking exempt district, it would have to be as it's written right now.
Okay.
I just want to say, I like the idea of leaving it in place and that we're not trying to change too many variables at the same time. And the ideal that I would suggest that it stays in and then we can come back and revisit it if we actually saw there was an opportunity to enhance the neighborhoods.
Okay.
That makes
I think
sense.
that's reasonable. All right, so we're going to, so that takes me back to A, you know, there has to be across the street from a business zone parcel.
I think we're still in a good position there,
Just
eliminating it.
the way it is,
Well, I think if we eliminate it, you're still having to fall within that
parking.
parking district, so it's just,
Okay.
it's fluff.
All right, so C is no on-site parking shall be constructed in excess of that required for residential use, and that kind of answers the. Whether it can go those other places, it probably can. Architecture of additions or alterations shall be consistent with the residential character of the neighborhood, no controversy. No interior display shall be visible from the exterior of the building. The outdoor storage of goods and materials shall be prohibited. Exterior lighting shall be residential in character with fixtures restricted to more than 10 feet in height, 75 watts maximum, with shielded or frosted fixtures and illumination levels limited to 5-foot candles or less. If this is going to be for a business, I would rather see shielded fixtures so that they don't encroach in other neighbors' yards versus.
You're suggesting- Eliminate the frosted.
As I say shielded or frosted.
Or from.
Frosted still crosses boundaries. Shielded keeps it pointed down and kind of keeps it from wandering off into
So-
other,
Cross out or frosted.
yeah, if everybody's agreeable to that.
Sure.
Okay. All right, customer hours shall be limited to 8.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes,
My question was just with the shielded, I mean, I get what you're saying. But how residential is that gonna look? I think that's probably why they put the frosted in. Were they trying to allow some ability to have things fit in better in the neighborhood? Or not?
Well, I think they're supposed to be shielded. I remember speaking with someone about, there is some regulation about, especially in neighborhoods, about light can't project beyond a certain distance if it's not shielded. It's gotta be shielded.
That is in the ordinance, but it's not enforced.
It's not enforced, but it is in the ordinance.
One plus here is that it stipulates a maximum of 75 watts, so,
Right,
you know, that's not real bright, so. I think even if it was frosted, it wouldn't be an issue.
right. That's what I was wondering.
okay, well, let's just leave the or frosted in. All right, customer hours shall be limited to 8 AM in the morning to 6 PM in the evening. Trash and waste disposal.
So
shall-
hang on,
Oh, okay.
sorry. Why is it 6 PM? Any problem with going to maybe 7 PM? I mean, sometimes businesses do need to stay open a little later for those that work and maybe can't get in if it was a law office or even an accountant.
Oh,
would that be disruptive to the neighborhood?
neighborhood, yeah, you know.
Sorry, George, out there.
Keep in mind that we're only talking a 1 block radius from the downtown business district too, so it's not as
Right.
if we're talking about in the heart of a single family neighborhood.
Good point.
Yeah, maybe no customer hours stipulated at all in that case.
So what's the overall feeling about not restricting? I mean,
Cynthia,
I'm assuming that this is going to be in probably in residential, multi-residential buildings. So I would think that you'd still want to do that 6 PM because there are people living there. So it's less, like they're off the clock by 6.
I'm reading a lot of different faces here, so
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is another one we just kind of monitor, we can come back to.
Okay.
Cynthia, could I go back? I'm sorry, it just occurred to me. Rick Mullen made a comment about the 75 watts, but if we're talking 75 incandescent watts, that's different than 75 LED watts. So watts is kind of a bit antiquated now. When this was written, that wasn't an issue.
Right,
All right,
So
75 watt incandescent equivalent.
equivalent would be an easy way to do it.
Will really date us in a couple of years.
No, we have to look it up.
all right, I think that's a good compromise. All right, so. Did we have any issues with trash and waste disposal shall only be curbside residential without use of on-site dumpsters?
Perfect.
And finally, all provisions of the sign ordinance are met. Now, for them, they would have to follow our sign ordinance for businesses and homes.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, and then we go on to, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So the next two is actually this is the one we're gonna do. And so the number 3 now for boarding houses is gonna be number 4. And it says boarding houses when located on a parcel of land not less than 7,200 square feet in area, occupancy shall not exceed 6 persons per structure, subject further to annual city licensing application for inspection and compliance with the International Property Maintenance Code. No license shall be issued for a boarding house within 400 feet of an existing boarding house. No, it's interesting. Oh, no, it just says occupants shall not exceed 6 persons. Okay.
Do we have
And-
any existing boarding houses?
Yes,
How many?
oh,
Curious.
I couldn't give you the number, I don't want to guess, I know they're out there.
Well,
I know public safety checks in on them. I don't know what their time frame is, but I know they do check in on them periodically.
there's a boarding house. We looked at the new brew pub. Well, like a block away, there's a boarding house. It's 2 little ranch houses that Stafford's redid, and that's where they house employees. So that's a current one. Right, and then I assume that number 5 will be accessory buildings and uses customarily incident to any of the above permitted uses. Will be out there. So we're good with that? All right, so I think that when you're combining the 1 and 2. We're doing the densest, which is 3 stories, 33 feet that we're going to allow. For the front setback, we're talking about 25 feet. And then for the side yards, it's 10 feet on each side. And the rear yard is 35 feet and maximum coverage is 30%. Any issues or concerns about that.
Are we talking about? You're talking about the RM multifamily, just,
Well, we're combining, he's showing us what exists now. RM1 multifamily has different ones than RM2 does. And then we're combining those two, and it's just going to be RM multifamily. So what's in red is the combination of those two.
well, there was just one thing that I noticed, there's an RM1 district, by Spring Street. I think it's Hayner. Yeah, the villa. And then the little bit on the other side of the street there, or the street doesn't really go through because I drove up there. But that would allow that area to be 3 stories or 33 feet. Is that what we want?
Well, I'd say that kind of falls into our discussion we're gonna have here in a little bit.
Well, I know, but if we're deciding on combining these RM districts,
Yeah. I think we don't need to talk about that,
Okay.
the height. And last time we talked about this, we also talked about the transitioning from this RM district to the single family residential. Do we want to have it at 3 stories? Or do we want to, where we're bordering a property line with a single family residential or on the same street? Do we want to maintain a lower height for that transition to the single family? We talked about that last time as well.
So just to help visualize, I don't know if anyone's driven past City Hall here on Lake Street, the house they're building right now. That one's exactly 33 feet.
To the mid span of the gable.
Yes. Yep. That one, we went through multiple iterations and finally we came up with what he was maximized at.
And for him, it's 2.5 stories. Because they got the first story is kind of
Correct.
partly underground.
Well, I just want to point out, yes, it does say 3 stories instead of 2.5 for RM1 multifamily. On the other hand, we're talking about 8 feet. It's not a significant change in these areas. Not enough certainly to rip down a 2.5 story place to build it a 33 foot. In practical terms.
I've been watching that go up. And curious about, because I know Ted had brought it up in one of our previous discussions on height, that could be overwhelming in a neighborhood. And I don't think it is. I think it's okay. It's not overwhelming the other houses. And I think it's a good example to show that 33 feet is not a big change.
And we have
Yeah.
existing homes within the city of Petoskey that are over 33 feet. So,
Right.
I agree, the height difference isn't huge, but when you're looking at a gable going to a flat roof. The daylight planes change where, blocking sun and shadows and whatnot. And I'm not opposed to raising the height to 33 feet, 3 stories. But the one parcel that is concerning is the one we're talking about, the height that is in this RM district, if we combine it, the RM1 where the villa is. And talking about the view shed of the bay. So that's the only one, if we're all okay with that.
I think that property might be slightly different just at the bottom of the hill. Versus at the top of the hill, as far as obstructing the view. To the bay.
Well, the villa is
Oh, I was gonna, yeah.
Yeah, no, the restaurant, yeah, no, the one at the top of the hill, so you're talking about
The nursing care.
yeah, so in the corner, you see the flagpole in the front yard, but that's only a 1-story building now, so it could be 3 stories, 33 feet.
and it would it would significantly block the view of the neighbors
Not-
behind. It will not.
It will not, it will for the neighborhood, but in terms of the community view of, when you come over and you see that crest of that view, it's already blocked by other buildings down the way. So if that were built to 33 feet, it's not going to impact our panoramic view of the bay.
No, I meant the houses on Highland Avenue
Mhm,
that are right behind it.
mhm.
You don't think they'd be affected?
Yeah, Highland Avenue or Highland Drive?
Or Highland Drive, sorry.
Well, the view that building would block would be the country view, the hilly view from the neighborhood.
Just something to consider.
What's really interesting, Zach, if this is accurate, it shows in that block at the end of Highland Drive, it shows actually two different height requirements, RM1 and RM2 currently. You get
Just
two
south
different-
of Highland Drive there.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, there is
I
a,
would presume that's what the parcel we're talking about, right?
no, just north of that, I think is where the.
Right in here.
Oh, that's the nursing home, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And we already have, this is allowed,
Right,
33 feet behind it.
interesting, huh?
There we go.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
got-
I mean,
that one got through.
Right, because it is just one little spot.
Yeah.
Little postage stamp there.
Well, I think it's because the grade is going down there on Hainer Drive, and so that building could be taller without really being a lot taller than the one roughly to the west of it.
Well, there's actually an apartment building on that.
Right. And that RM2. RM2 parcel, yes.
There's currently, I think there's construction to the south there outside of the city. So that begs another question of, well, you're always blocking somebody's view no matter what.
Well, those are just gonna be more of those 1-story or 2-story built into the hill duplexes.
I don't know that for sure. Are you saying you do know? Okay.
Yeah.
Andrea's also saying.
So those won't affect any views there, sure.
Well, I should mention that that one slice is not just the villa, but also that Sunrise Electronics.
I believe the Sunrise is in B3A.
Yep.
Well, I'm comfortable with consolidating it on the 3-story 33 feet. I don't think that we've established that it would have a significant impact to not do so.
Yeah, I think that the view. That the master plan, I think, encourages us to protect is the lake view. And that panoramic view as you come across the hill. So this would not impact that.
Well, and as a practical matter, I don't foresee that they're going to tear down the villa and build 3 stories there. I hate to continue to be practical about these things.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, they could have a
Ted?
fire. There could be a fire, you know. God forbid. Anything could happen.
I think we should direct Zach to make the revisions that we've talked about tonight and consolidate all of this and then bring it back to us for another review.
So we'll do another review and then consider doing a public hearing after that.
Right.
Okay.
That's
I just have one question, you know, as we embark on this. There's really, unless I'm missing it, there's relatively few RM1 pieces we're talking about. Up on the map. I just wasn't quite sure what we were thinking we were exactly getting out of this. Like we spent a lot of time on this, which is pain, but.
Well, I think we're trying to simplify the ordinance for one thing. And, yeah, they're pretty much the same, and because so few RM1s are affected, it doesn't make a big change to the overall zoning.
And this is the easiest one to tackle first, to your point, right? Yeah, I would just to share my opinion with, given this opportunity, I would be in support of the changes here. I would also be open to a future conversation about the setback, the front setback and the lot coverage as a way to encourage, greater density. And I guess I want to stick to my original comment, but I don't want to necessarily change too many things all at once. But I would certainly, as a future conversation, future topic, would have an interest in exploring those two characteristics of the zone.
So you want to go allow a larger percentage of coverage and less setback? Is what you're saying?
I would be potentially open to those, to look at those as an opportunity to increase more housing, more density into into these neighborhoods.
Okay, I just want a clarification on E. In the RM multiple family district, multifamily dwellings shall be located on a lot area not less than 5,000 square feet. The following minimum lot sizes shall be provided for dwelling unit. For every dwelling unit beyond the first unit whose land area need is 5,000 square feet. So your first unit would be a combination of, say you had, you did 2 3-bedroom units in a building, that would be 5,000 feet.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out, so then if you wanted to do more, you wanted to add more units. If you did a 1,500 square foot, if you did an efficiency apartment, you would need an additional 1,500 square feet added to that 5,000. So you could have 2 3-bedrooms and 1 efficiency. If you had 6,500 feet. So I'm interpreting that correctly. Okay.
I just have a comment on height. I think we talked about the one that's 33 feet. We're talking about that property that's going up on Westlake Street.
Mhm.
Right. Single family, I think, right? I don't know if it's occurred to many people and good intentions, but what I see going on in my neighborhood is when things get ripped down and get built tall, it's by someone with a lot of money who doesn't live here. Not only is it single family, but they don't even live here. So we have some concerns as we talk about thinking we're someone's building these 4-unit apartments, that what's really happening is things are going too tall. Dr. Charles' house, more and more of that stuff. It makes me wonder, because that's what I see happening.
I would agree in the single family residential areas. But I think in the multifamily. I think it would be, I don't know that somebody's gonna want to build a mansion next to an apartment building. Whereas in the city, they do want to do that in single family residential. But I don't know, am I wrong? Yeah. That's how I would interpret that. So do you want a motion? So I'll take a motion.
I move that we have Zach. I move that we have Zach consolidate this information and make the revisions that we've discussed tonight and bring it back to the commission to review at a future meeting.
Rick makes the motion. Rick makes the motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Yeah, Rich Meridian seconded it. Roll call vote.
Yes.
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 So when it comes back, will it be the entire section for us to review?
When I bring it back, I'll bring it back as if it were ordinance. I won't include any of the old stuff unless that's requested.
Right, but you'll include everything that's necessary for it to become an ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we got that. Now we move on to item 4B in old business, which is discussion of zoning amendments to condense zoning districts B1 local business, B2A transitional business, B2B mixed use corridor, and OS office service to one MB mixed business district. Zach, you wanna?
Yep, just bear with me here. So there we go. So again, on this one, I really teased it down. I know there's a lot of information the last time. Tried to make it a little simpler. I included a chart. There it is. This time, Doug, I know you requested that I kind of did the opposite of what you requested. I'm sorry, but as I was filling it out, I was like, it just worked that way. So next to the names, those are the recommendations I had on there for as far as permitted or special use. This isn't that different than, I mean, it's the same as what you saw before, just graphically. I omitted the likes, because there's no sense in talking to the ones that are already similar. So these are the only different ones that didn't have all of the same checks.
Okay, so there's other uses, but
Correct.
their use is allowed in all of them currently.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
What's L mean in Prince?
Licensed. They need a yearly license.
Thank you.
And SCU means special condition use and P means permitted.
Mhm.
All right, well, I wonder if, what do you want to tackle first? Shall we tackle the uses first?
I think that worked well the last time.
Okay.
Are you suggesting then that all the uses listed here would go in all the districts, or is that what?
That's what we're talking.
Because it's kind of striking that B1 and OS have relatively few of these,
Right.
and then there's a whole list for the other two. So it seems like you have to look at it more closely, but it's quite a significant change for what's allowed in office service in B1 local.
As I read these, Ted, to me, those uses, while they were different by definition, they were similar in intent. And that's why I chose those ones.
By intent, you mean?
Intensity.
And I would say if we go through these, when I think of these districts, and of course it helps to look at the map to see where they all are. When I look at these uses and then look where these districts are on the map, it seems to me that most of them would be fine in those areas. So I think if we go through it, and I hope you all have your maps out, just kind of reference, what does that mean? What's it near? Is it compatible or not?
And I see what you're saying. One way to look at this is to say, well, let's take the office service one up on Mitchell Street. There's little purple areas there. Yeah.
In the church.
Or in Cannibal, we could go to Cannibal over there. So on one hand, you could say they're in these quarters are really close to other things like that. But they do back up to neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So is that the reasoning? Like to not have a brew pub? You know, it's what it's backing up to.
Well, we have a brew pub that we just approved. That's in the mixed, the RM 1 and 2 neighborhoods. So we have concluded that that was compatible with a neighborhood. Just recently. Well, let's start at the beginning of the list. So we look at bed and breakfast.
It was in the industrial, but it was adjacent to an RM2.
Mhm.
Okay,
Well, let's go through bed and breakfast. It's a permitted use, but it's also licensed. We have nothing to do with the licensing. The city does that. And is it the police that do that licensing or
The city clerk,
the city clerk? Okay.
which incorporates, it goes through a lot of hands, goes through me, goes through public safety,
Mhm.
DPW, it goes through a lot of hands.
Right. So I don't know that a bed and breakfast might be desirable in the mixed, our combination of mixed businesses. But do you see any problem as you look at the map and you look at the pink and the purple and the rosy color and the dark red?
Yeah, could you put the map,
Which map do you guys want up?
the colored zoning map?
This one,
The proposed or the existing?
you have a proposed one?
But the existing,
I can pull it up, I have it right here, so.
Well, I'm fine. Well, the proposed doesn't have all the others on.
no, the
I
existing.
want to see the existing zoning. That's
Absolutely.
can you enlarge it somewhat? Thank you.
All right, so the question is bed and breakfast. Is there any place there where it just shouldn't be? I think that probably it's may not be desirable in those areas, but I don't see any harm in it being in any of those areas. Okay.
The only comment I would have, and I'm kind of looking at 3 pages at the same time.
Mhm.
If you look at the allowance for stories in terms of number of stories, feet, and the setbacks, there is a wider spectrum of allowances in these districts than the previous RM1 and RM2 that we saw before. So that when we're responding to your question of do you have any problem with those? The recommendations he's made down here at the bottom are consistent with the B2A transitional business and the B2B mixed use corridor that bed and breakfast is currently categorized under. But it is, when we get to the B1, it's going to be a considerable increase.
Right, but if you look at where B1 is, one is on
Mitchell.
I totally agree. If I look at that chart,
where they exist,
Yeah.
I don't see a problem.
I don't see a problem either. I'm just pointing out that there is a variation in the setback and the height requirements between these 3 zones that as we look at the map, we should take into consideration. That happens to be the maximum that he's representing, so I don't see an issue, as you mentioned. Or as it exists.
I wonder. That's the dentist office and the bank. On Mitchell.
From the YMCA.
Right. Guess I'm not understanding where this is. Yeah, it's on Cannibal Avenue. It's Cannibal and. I don't know what street that is.
Turns into Jefferson.
Yeah, I think that's a dentist office and a bank, and then there's a church.
But the YMCA now rents space in the office next door to that.
Oh, okay. But even if those got built as 3-story, you have next to it B3.
B3.
Yeah, B3, which we're not including in this group. It's right next to B3, so I would say that. The 3 stories, 37 feet are gonna be compatible
Mhm.
with being next to those.
And the hospital across the street.
Yeah,
Okay.
which,
Cast a shadow.
yeah. All right, so it's a consensus that bed and breakfast can be in all. In our combined. Future MB. Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to go through them one by one or can do people have ones that stand out and we can tackle the ones that stand
Sure.
out? Be a little
Okay.
faster.
Okay. So. Do hotels stand out?
Does anybody have any issues with any of these uses? Thinking about combining the 4 districts?
I would say the drive-through facility, but that's only driven by the site and if it can allow it, so,
And that's a special condition use.
yeah.
So food service with or without alcohol? I don't see a problem with where these areas are.
Mm-mm.
General retail, open air business. A warehouse and wholesale, I think are kind of odd to put in there,
That's special use.
right?
Only in the B2B.
But is that something? Do we have any other place where warehouse is allowed?
It'd be industrial and
Is a B3 general business allowed?
no, but the B3B in business industrial does.
B3 and oh,
Most of it exists along the Greenway and down into the Emmett Street corridor.
mhm. I don't know. It seems warehouse and wholesale ought to be in light industrial and probably not encouraged anywhere else.
My thought there was that with it being a special condition use, we would just have very strict restrictions and it would have to be the perfect site. And I don't have in my mind, I don't have that parcel. But if with those restrictions, it would be very, very few, if any.
So would we be talking about those conditions?
Absolutely. We could.
All right, so is there any other concerns? All right. Aside from warehouse and wholesale, that definitely has to be strict. But everything else seems like it's compatible. All right, moving on to this page. The definition or the introduction of the mixed business. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
You're on the page 2, the typewritten.
This,
Actually, I was on this.
you just doing the chart first.
The chart.
Yeah, so it's just the introduction, mixed business district,
The intent,
okay.
okay.
Does anybody have everything fine?
Oh, is that
Okay.
for me?
All right. And then we're combining the B1, the B2A, B2B and office service. For some reason, the multifamilies got put on there,
Just because of the I think
just so we can reference what,
is a reference and I think some of the script, the text in there kind of overlapped with, I thought with 1 or 2 of them, or maybe it was just to reference what was meant there.
No, also, I think in the principal uses permitted, don't we have, it says to include any residential uses
That's right.
permitted
That's
in the.
that's exactly why it's there. Thank you.
Yeah.
do we want to continue that nest egg style of zoning? We do that now, anything in this one, you know,
Versus spelling it out.
versus, yeah, do we?
As we're doing this, I'm gonna be spelling it out for each one. That's is my intent, is to have it so that you don't have to reference back to every time. Save the setbacks,
Mhm.
but uses, I want all the uses in one spot.
The Department of Redundancies.
Yes, yes.
All right, so I guess let's go through because there's letters to be looked at here. We're talking about combining these, we're recommending 3 stories, 37 feet. The front yard setback is at 15 feet with caveats of B and G, and B is the minimum front yard setback. Is the average of the front yard setbacks of any 3 adjacent houses on the same block base. Or 25 feet, whichever is less. what would be the minimum front yard setback you could have? It just doesn't define it, it just says the average of the other front yards. So if the other front yards are, I don't know,
If they're at the line.
3 feet, if they're 3 feet, then we just want to maintain that line, that's the goal.
Question, did you say in the definition that said houses?
The house,
Adjacent, it probably should say buildings,
Or properties or something, and structures?
structures.
I think. As it's written now for many of them, when it says the RM2. Like, you can have residential uses, I know it says this in many of the districts. You can have the RM2, you can have housing in there, but they fall back to that RM2 requirements. As far as dimensional setbacks, heights, things like that. It's different for the house than it would be for a mixed use, you know, if it's a convenience store or whatever.
So that brings up the question, why is it 3 stories, 37 feet? And not just 3 stories, 33 feet, like we are gonna do for the RM? Like, why that 4 extra feet? I know it was in the transitional business and in the mixed use corridor before it's 37. But why that 4 feet? Like, what does that do?
I think that 4 extra feet is common with commercial buildings, gives you a little more space and latitude in your design. Whereas when you have a little bit less in the residential areas, it kind of keeps your form for the neighborhood intact. That's how I've always understood it. I know it's 4 feet, but could it make the difference? I mean, with this being a mixed use district is the intent. We want differences in there, right? I mean, that's kind of the goal, is to have a little bit of everything, so. Yeah.
And I also think since it's existing 3 stories, 37 feet for B2A transitional and B2B. But if we were to lessen it, then there's always the issue of reducing what's allowed.
Can you rephrase that? I'm sorry.
Well, she's asking about why we're choosing 37 feet. We, when we're combining them, we look at what all of them did and then figure out what the best. Generally, the one that allows the most density, in this case, is 37 feet. If we were to say, make it less, then 2 of our current zones, we'd be restricting what's been allowed. So. I think. That makes sense. So the 15.
Rich, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking, do we really want to include the office service? Because I have no problem with combining the other areas. But the office service, which, you know, are transitional areas. I guess I would rather keep those where they're at right now, but otherwise, the other ones I don't have any problem with combining.
From a height standpoint, or?
Well, both from a height standpoint and, you know, they're like the one over by Woodland and Mitchell and Division. I mean, you're gonna, you know, if you allow 3 stories there, that's a big change in that spot, I would think. And over by Cannibal and Jackson and Monroe. Because those are neighborhoods, you know, you're right up against the neighborhood there.
Well, for instance, the one on between Woodland and Wakazoo, that's a church. The library.
AT&T.
And AT&T.
On the north side, you know, the funeral home there.
The library is, yeah, but
Yeah. So they're already churches and
And
a
they're
library, and they're
not,
at those heights now.
they're probably exceeded, they're not conforming, they're a variance.
Yeah,
Okay.
No, the greatest controversy is the potential anyway, is basically across the street from here, between here and 131. There's that, it's a triangular area or pie shaped area that's currently on the map. Next to what is called Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, right.
Who knew?
100 feet of it.
Wow.
well, that also is, that was a business. The
Yeah.
house on the corner and they've just completely redone it and it's up for sale.
Right,
Yeah,
but this seems to extend all the way down to basically equivalent to across from City Hall. But I think all of those buildings are higher, taller anyway.
Okay, so if that was allowed 37 feet there, that wouldn't be an issue.
I think they're taller than that right now.
Oh, okay. Right by Sunset there?
Yeah,
So the
Okay.
big concern is where something could get torn down and built new. Going up at the new height.
well, again, on that block,
I mean, anywhere where.
Right,
Proposing this
right.
combination.
The
so
fact that they're already that height. I don't know that there'd be incentive to tear them down. I don't think you gain anything.
Yeah, your use.
True. Do you have a comment?
For this stretch right here, I mean, they're kind of isolated. I don't have much concern in that area.
Are there areas here that you are concerned about?
Not as much, so if you go towards Porter, there's those few little splotches there. But again, those ones, there is that apartment building there, and there's a warehouse building right in there somewhere
Mhm.
that's very tall.
are you talking Porter and Maple?
Porter.
Or are you
and-
talking about
Yeah,
Porter and
Porter, Maple, and Curtis.
Is that-
Limited resource.
That's the women's resource.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Looks like
That's on Porter, but the interesting, the ones on Maple are an interesting. Wonder how that got to be.
there is, there's a hair plate, there's a couple hair places in there and. Um,
And the ones on Connell don't seem to be objectionable either, right? I mean,
No.
based on the buildings that are already there.
Mhm.
And that seems to be the limit of that OS district.
Yeah.
So why do we not have maximum lot coverage areas for any of the business districts? Curious, you know?
that's pretty common, because what I've seen in a lot of other areas is where they'll dictate that's 100%, that's 90%, that's 99%. Here, it's just kind of, as you will.
But if it was a large lot, would we want to restrict it so there's some green space on the lot and you're not, even though you have setbacks, but would we want them to maximize? Or is that not a concern?
Well,
We don't have-
it's a business district. So I would think the setbacks would be enough.
So in terms of the setbacks, we had B, which we're changing adjacent structures on the same block space. So it's whatever they are, or 25 feet, which is whatever is less. And then the second part is parking may be permitted in all yard areas after approval of the parking plan. They are by the planning. We don't really see any problems with that either.
I think that gives you guys the latitude to help with any of those uses that are next to.
I did
residential.
I did wonder a little bit about that for. In. This new business district that would be next to. Multifamily neighborhoods. Whether it would be appropriate to allow parking in the front yard adjacent to those neighborhoods. And I thought about the option of adding in there something like. Parking in front yards within 300 feet or 1 block of residential zones is prohibited.
With the parking plan layout coming to you guys. I think you have that latitude kind
Okay.
of built in. That's kind of my hope is it's coming to you not similar to right here on Mitchell, we had just recently, 215. The Young and Meath building,
Mhm.
they didn't come for the building, they came for just the parking, which was not a big deal, but. The fail safe was there.
But I think the flexibility is a great idea, but in picking up on what he just said, should we add something about transition,
Mhm.
accepting close to transition neighborhoods or accommodating transition and giving us a little bit more flexibility to say no, putting front yard parking because it is close to a residential neighborhood.
What does it say in the RM though?
About front yard parking?
Yeah, it's not allowed, is it?
No.
I think, picking up on what you guys are saying, just on that point, before I get into the RM, you know, a statement that just says protecting the character of the neighborhood, the intent of the neighborhood, parking situation, something like that.
Protecting transition to residential neighborhoods.
Right, might be
Yeah,
a little more for you guys to
Address
stand
that.
on.
question. That sounds good to me.
Okay.
And then I wanted to go back up to footnote F. Where it says. Minimum setback of 30 feet to any exterior property line, and up in footnote B. We're already saying 25 feet.
Yeah, well.
Shouldn't those be the same?
You don't have that.
Oh,
Right, they do, you know, they're, F belongs to,
oh, yeah, okay, F goes away, I see.
so, but F is something that we didn't discuss. Whether we wanted to keep that, so we ought to remember to look at that when he brings the language back.
So B and G are the only footnotes where,
For the mixed business, but in the mixed business. In B1 local. And office service. They had, and B1 local and office service. The neighborhood, so it was like Michigan. There's Mitchell and then Michigan, so the residential, like down by Elizabeth Street. We were trying to protect those homes a little bit more. Oh, thank you. So we're trying to protect those homes a little bit more. And I think that's why we had, there shall be a minimum setback of 30 feet to any exterior property line. Where a side yard abuts the street, the width of the side yard shall not be less than 25 feet. And that, oh, wait a minute. Excuse me, I'm talking about H and G. That's what we have to relook at for the RM too. H says no side yard shall be required along interior side lot lines, provided however that all applicable provisions of building codes in effect are satisfied. That's no longer included. And I don't know that we want that kind of density. Is that one reason why you deleted it?
Yeah, simply have letter H.
H. It was for D1 and office service originally.
Yeah, it was in there. My thinking was, first sidebar. Seemed a little redundant, I guess. It's kind of built, it's kind of baked in with setbacks as it is.
Well, no, H is saying that on the interior, you don't have to do the side, so basically you don't have to do side yard setbacks, like if you had two buildings. You wouldn't have to do setbacks within the property
If it was two buildings.
if it was two buildings. And I would think since this is transitional, that you probably, I don't know that you want that. I think you want to keep the side yard. Or do you? I don't know. This is talking about the interior. But we have side yard setbacks, but we don't really, if there's a second building, what do we have
I
for?
think building code kind of
Okay,
handles that is
Okay.
my thinking there.
and then the other one that was. It was H and G, so it was about the parking. And then allowing. interior side lot lines, didn't need to have side yards. But it does say that all applicable provisions of building codes in effect are satisfied. So do we feel that the mixed business setbacks are enough when they're abutting multi-residential? 5 feet and it's 5 feet side yard setbacks and only a 10-foot rear setback? Is that adequate?
Well, considering that in RM1, side yard setback is now 5 feet. I don't have a problem with the 5 feet on the side yard.
Okay,
And I think that the other setbacks are personally within reason, so.
okay. All right. So,
You need a motion?
yeah, I believe we've discussed this.
I move that Zach go ahead and consolidate for review at our next meeting. As we've discussed here tonight.
I'll second.
Okay. Charlie made the motion, Matt made the second, and roll call vote.
Buck,
Yes.
Detmer,
Yes.
McSweeney,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Newman. Yes. Paul,
Yes.
Robson,
Yes,
Wilmot.
Yes.
okay. We will see that next time. All right. We now move on to agenda item 4C. In old business. Zoning P3A Resort Commercial District Amendment for height allowance. So tonight. We will either be declining further review of the subject and returning it to city council. Or if we choose to take it on again, schedule a future hearing and re-vote on the issue. So that's what we're discussing tonight. Did you have anything to add to that, Zach? No. Who would like to start? Carolyn?
Can we rezone the one parcel on the southwest to mixed business since we're allowing hotel and we've raised the height? Is that something we could start with for discussion, or is that not a good direction?
To be honest, that's not a consideration. I'd considered to put it into that one. Certainly an option. Thinking out loud, I think that's a solid idea.
So we would put this with our new. With our new future mixed business, so that's the one we would use, okay?
Which parcel?
It's the corner of Sheridan and Spring Street. Across from the Harbor Watch PUD and across from the Crestview Mall PUD.
So
It's the little green spot on the map.
on this map up on the screen, it would be this pink one here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Would fall in, that would all be that gold color.
Oh, it's
Oh,
pink.
I'm sorry, not the gold.
It's
It'd be
pink
the,
now.
it's pink. I had to change, I changed the colors around because I had fewer of them.
Okay, all right. So the green on our map is pink on this one.
This is the proposed map with the changes that we were just discussing.
Mhm.
Change it to what?
So
It'd become our new mix.
it'd be this orange.
The dark orange.
Yeah,
Where point to one where it's mixed business.
over here,
Okay,
through here.
we might want to work on these colors a little bit.
Yeah,
How is that different? Didn't we have a discussion about that in terms of spot zoning?
Mhm.
But there was also some preliminary discussion about establishing that as a PUD.
as I'm looking at it now. And you see that it's got that gold, it's got the yellow, it's got, and the kind of part of the intent of that mixed business is to be adjacent to those residential areas and serve as part of a transition. I think we're kind of going back to, we had the discussion previously on, there is no transition south of there, or north of there, rather. We're playing the hand we're dealt. With what Carolyn suggested, we have a little bit of an opportunity that it does kind of serve as a transition
So it will be mixed business.
to be mixed business.
What's the benefit of doing that?
It allows 3 stories.
Yeah. 37 feet hotel.
But keep in mind the setbacks between B3A
Yeah.
and the mixed business is considerably different, 50 feet. In the current B3A.
And we definitely want to keep that because of
Yeah.
the corridor view shed.
But we just made the parcel above it part of the RM. Or I'm sorry, part of the MB.
I don't believe we did.
Is that
RM.
tract of land, are they required the 50-foot setback?
So
Yeah.
Where the current, it's
the
currently
nursing home would be right here.
RM1 is what it is currently, and we talked about putting that to the new RM.
Correct.
So, is that area required to have a 50-foot setback?
No.
No.
I think the only thing, I wonder if the only thing that has a 50-foot setback is the, what currently is B3A resort.
Correct.
So then the B3 general business, none of that has the, it's only just this downhill.
Just that portion has the wider setback.
Okay. And then does Harbor Watch, it's PUD, did they actually? Does that have a setback like that?
Not.
I don't
50
think
feet.
they do. It's
No.
not 50 feet.
No.
Well, the RM1 does now, where it. Where it's going.
Well, and decreasing the setback for that particular parcel from the 50 feet to the one that we just discussed for the mixed business. It probably is not an adverse thing on that particular parcel. Well, the 50 feet on the other side is kind of sacrosanct, okay?
Yeah.
But whether you have 50 feet on that side or 25 feet on that side, I'm not sure it makes any difference.
I think I'd like to know that concretely.
There you go.
Because in the current. We're backtracking a little bit. We're talking about RM1 again. What was RM1 and would become RM, and Highland Drive is behind it. Currently, RM1 multifamily was a 50-foot setback. For the front yard setback.
Yeah.
So I guess
Well, by.
and we're changing it to
25.
25.
By combining the two RMs, we're trying to gain more density and more housing.
Right.
So that was the purpose that we went from 50 to 25.
And I think I'm tracking you, Cynthia, having a little bit of concern now with the property with the nursing home
Mhm,
that's on the other side of the road,
mhm,
and there's a big grade there. That's a pretty steep hill
mhm.
that they have to work with. That's kind of limiting them as it is. So that building right now, I would venture to guess, is further than 50 feet.
I would agree with that, but I'd also I bet you a nickel, that if I took a tape measure out there, the Sunrise building is not 50 feet setback.
Yeah, I agree.
Sunrise.
The Sunrise Electronics.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that the old American Best was not 50 feet, although I can't prove that because it isn't there to measure anymore.
Right.
Well, I have an aerial in it. I mean, I can't say exactly, but it looks like it's less than 50 feet.
I'll measure it right now.
Okay, for the next time we see this again, I'd just like to have it confirmed that 25 feet does not impact the community view. I don't think it will, but I just want to confirm that.
But since we are gonna see it again, right?
No, I'm talking, we are gonna see the RM change. Yeah. Oh, if you got something up that kind of speaks to it.
So that's the distance right now of the nursing home.
It says length, so what are we
The
looking
length
at?
of the building,
That's from the setback, that's the setback from the property line to the building, roughly.
105 feet.
Mhm.
Well, where are you getting 105 feet?
he's doing fancy stuff with a computer.
Oh,
Does that say 36?
Yeah,
So Sunrise is less than 50 feet from the road.
all right, that's interesting. Okay,
And you said that it was on a slope, but it's not really on a slope.
there's a steep grade right here.
Right there, yeah.
so what you're saying is that's not buildable at this time because of the steep slope.
Yeah, it would take a lot of digging
Okay,
to get, just to the parking lot there is through 50 feet.
okay.
So just a question to clarify, in determining a new height for that parcel that we're talking about, it would be based on the elevation at the road. So they couldn't really build 3 stories.
It'll be based on the elevation on 131.
That's what the zoning says, right?
That's.
Yeah.
It's got.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, great.
At the property line.
Mhm.
So it might be a little bit off the road, is what you're saying, like sidewalk.
Right.
What you're saying is that if the height of 37 feet starts at the street,
yeah.
whatever you call that,
Great.
then grade, and it is a big
Mhm.
up. Well, that just doesn't seem like the right interpretation for that.
Right.
And we can certainly look at height definition there,
What we were
but
saying was there's a sidewalk there, so it's actually not the street grade, it's the
Property line.
The city property goes to the inside edge of the sidewalk.
You average the length of that property from the low point to the high point along the property line.
Mhm.
It would be that average. You work off
But
of.
it's where it front faces is where you look at the change.
Yes.
And in this case, it's going not front, but it's the side part.
Not sure what you mean there, but it's the length of the 131 frontage that
Yes.
you would be averaging
Yes,
at the property line.
Because there is a grade to 131 there, obviously, so you'd have to take the average, not
Right.
the specific location.
okay, well, and we'll resolve that another time. Exactly.
And we've discussed that previously about the height and how we measure that.
Mhm,
That's one example. A good reason to look at it.
mhm.
So I'm trying to understand your point, Cynthia, that the grade goes up. So are you saying, is someone saying that potentially they would want to allow more height than at the street grade because the property grades up? And that's,
Yeah, but
They're just limited.
There's only limited right now.
Unless they use that.
Tear down and rebuild.
so if you change your definitions, what I've heard is the reason you have that is because some people are fairly smart, and when they want to go higher, some people who have money will bring in dirt. And if it's gonna be the ground around the building, they will build up dirt so they can go higher.
But they don't get a bigger building that way.
They get a better view.
Yeah.
That's the point, and they block more views. So if you don't, that's why they do, my understanding why you do a street grade, so you prevent people from building a mound.
Well, and you also have rules that state based on the existing grade, not your.
Right.
You're still, there you go, it's not working. So can we all agree that we should just rezone that one parcel? Based on the
I
things.
still don't understand the advantage.
Well, then we don't need to change the height in our B3A. Would we be satisfied with it the way it is?
Well, the first fundamental question, as Cynthia outlined, is do we want to discuss this opportunity anymore? And come to some kind of other decision than we came to before? Or do we simply want to say, we made a decision, recommended it to council, let council handle it?
And in thinking about that, staff told us to encourage us to look at section 1708, which is walls. And section 1716, is our site plan review standards. And then I also thought we should look at the 1704, the parking requirements for the different uses. But, I mean, circling back to.
So
Somebody just said,
Yeah, we can look at those, but if we're gonna send it back to council, what's the point?
Well, I think Carolyn's point is that if I went through them, and then just copied the ones that specifically speak to the issues of this zone. And I came to the conclusion that we have everything we need to ameliorate any problems that the neighborhood has within our zoning. We already have tools to do that.
Upon site review?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if you want me that's, it's like that.
I don't want to go into those at this point, but
Right.
I agree with that the standard performance requirements are pretty extensive,
Mhm.
or the site performance requirements, I guess.
So just
So, I'm sorry, to understand what you're both saying, if the height was increased for B3A, the 3-story, that the performance review standards before the planning commission would give us flexibility to make sure that it's a good match for the neighborhood setting. Is that what you're saying?
Relative to those performance requirements, yes.
I'm saying that that within our zoning, there are tools like the walls, being allowed to have a wall to separate the commercial use from the residential. So, landscaping, lighting, we have the ability to control those things that have been a problem for the neighborhood.
But that the 3 stories would be a right under the revised zoning. So you're not modifying the height of the structure, but you're modifying other circumstances for that site plan.
Wouldn't be modifying them, they already exist.
No, yes, but you'd have, the planning commission would have more input on the other attributes of that site plan, but not on the height.
I would say if we chose to bring this back, that we have the tools to make it possible for B3A to become something more dense and protect the neighborhoods. The other thing that I think we need to do due diligence, if we were to consider this, is to do an inventory of the buildings that are already there. And then calculate, I'm willing to bet that 37 feet, there's one building that's 4 stories. I don't know how tall it is, but I'm willing to bet it's 37 feet. It's already there. But I think that to do due diligence, we need to confirm what's already there. And, you know, and that's just fact-based. And then also just determine if 37 feet, because it's a grade at each site, does 37 feet actually impact that community panoramic view?
Fact-based.
Fact-based.
So what I hear you saying, is that we want, that you're advocating that it be rediscussed at the planning commission level.
Pardon me for putting words in your mouth. If the planning commission wishes to reevaluate, then she's requesting that it be fact-based evaluation and that additional facts and research needs to be done probably by staff or a consultant organization. One of the- Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, although I'd be willing with help to do the work. We have two architects that I think know how to measure buildings really well.
It's not just the height, though. That's not the only issue that the neighborhood is concerned with.
Right, there are issues with trash, noise, lighting, all those things, but when I went through our ordinance and what we are allowed to control, we can control all those negative things that they're experiencing. We have ways of ameliorating that.
But I'm sorry, we had discussion about, for instance, anyone thinks it's real, a car alarm system going off in the middle of the night.
Mhm,
So it gets taken care of eventually,
mhm.
10 minutes, 15 minutes. I guess you could call the police. That it happened. The people couldn't sleep. There's no way to ameliorate that nuisance.
But nuisance control is out of our lane of decision making. That is up to public.
We
safety.
have a stated goal to preserve and protect
Mhm.
the neighborhoods.
You could also argue the hotel's already there.
Right,
I mean, the nuisance is already present.
right.
That's not going away.
The question is making it bigger. More of it. I also think I agree that the community's beach sheds are important, but to some extent, the character of the neighborhoods view aesthetics are important. It's not totally nothing. I mean, these people pay taxes, they live here. It's not nothing. They're sitting here. The real people.
Mhm.
So they have houses, they bought them, they've invested in them. I just don't understand that doesn't mean anything.
Madam Chairman, can I make a recommendation that based on the question of, do we give it back to council or do we further review it? That we take a straw poll of the commission at this time,
Okay,
because the nature, the membership of the commission has changed and the number of commissioners that are here has changed dramatically from the previous review.
okay. So all those in favor of moving it on to city council without looking at it again, raise your hand. Go ahead. Just
I'm not
hit
sure-
your thing.
I'm not sure if it's the right way to say that. We're passing it on to city council
Mhm.
versus we're not taking up the issue again.
Okay,
Right.
well, that changed.
You supporting our previous recommendation?
Okay. But we choose to support our previous recommendation. Does that work for you? Okay. Anybody voting yes for that? We choose to support our previous recommendation.
It's going back to council.
So
We're not gonna spend any more time on it.
we send it to council as is. Do I need to ask this a different way?
Yeah.
Do I have a suggestion how to ask it? What?
So it kind of almost felt like a double negative, and I think that was throwing some confusion.
All right, if somebody else would like to try.
Who supports further review of this proposed change? And potentially a future public hearing subject to that review and any changes and recommendations that we might make as a result of that review. versus sending it back to the city council at this time.
So we're saying that we want to review
Dig into
it,
it more.
dig into it more? Is that what you're raising your hand for?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we have a majority here.
Yeah, I raised my hand too,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Well, now that I'm at this end, I can see. Who's doing it? All right. Then shall we have a motion to have this on our next agenda? Or maybe,
Well, what criteria do we want, what criteria do we want to establish for further review?
My suggestion, I think this ties into it, is the rezoning of those two potential properties, southwest.
As an alternative.
I think that is gonna seriously impact a lot of votes here, as I'm reading faces, so. If that, with that, the American Stress Hotel, the Sunset Electronics, if that becomes a mixed use business as was thrown out there,
mhm,
I think that kind of changes a lot of, as I was reading faces anyway, it looked kind of like that could change some ideas here.
So you're gonna help us with that, right? Looking at the viability of that.
Yeah. I'll bring that in as part of this conversation when I come back.
And can you talk to council if they would have any feedback for us if we were to change that zoning? And potentially not change the height in the B3A? I'm still confused at why they're pushing us to change that height in the first place.
But we have to do, we make recommendations to council. I mean, at some point. We're 9 adults. We've got some smart people here. We have community input. We have to make our best decision, and then they respect that, and then they can do what they wish. That's why they have a planning commission, to get independent.
So what other criteria would, what research or data would people like to see to continue this discussion at our next meeting?
I would say what I'd like is an inventory of the height of buildings there now.
Would that inventory include the PUD across the street for perspective? Or the surrounding
Well,
zones?
I don't think that PUD impacts anything on the view. I mean, it is what it is, and I don't think that. That has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with. Going down the hill.
Well, but I think all the buildings that are there now should be taken into consideration, whether they're in this district or not,
Both sides of the street.
both sides of
All
the
the way to
street.
no.
The bigger buildings, so we know how big they are.
Mhm,
And what about setbacks?
Yes,
mhm.
existing.
Existing height and existing setback.
It would also be interesting to know what the criteria was established for that PUD, or if it's not just that PUD, but the other zones on both sides of the street, top and bottom. I just think we need a much clearer view. And I would also like to go back to a question that I had before. The zone map is kind of generalized. It doesn't exactly show boundaries for where the zone ends and where properties begin. So maybe a GIS property map showing us the overlay of the zones would be very helpful.
And bring us back, other things that we talked about before is that certain parcels have a slope of themselves on the backside. So whereas the street, they could be 2, potentially 3 stories, they may be even taller on the back because of the slope of a particular parcel. I know we mentioned about there's some mitigating factors that we can incorporate in terms of some of these concerns that we have. I think we need to have a discussion about that, because I don't know how you mitigate a 3-story light pollution, light coming in from a 3-story structure from the surrounding neighborhoods. So I don't know how, I guess, maybe my opinion could change if I thought that was really an effective solution. So I think we need to talk about If there's ways that you can really mitigate light pollution, noise pollution. I know there's been a concern about trash, like how do you create effective barriers from the existing neighborhoods to do this? And so I guess I would question really the effectiveness of any of those things in our toolbox that we could use to prevent those concerns in the future.
Also, given the 50-foot setback in this zone, it'd be nice to know what the difference is between the grade height of the road and the height of that physical property at the 50-foot setback.
Right, and how are we calculating height if it's to the road, as we were discussing, then if there's a hill.
Exactly. Up or down.
Mhm. So I don't know.
Well, Doug mentioned some of the properties there are higher, like there's that bank. Is that still an existing bank or?
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, pretty close to the road grade, and that would be a significant building if it was built 3 stories there. Just as an example.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
Well, and there's a lot, we're giving you a big homework assignment.
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you get your arms around this or?
So is this something where, you need more time than the next meeting? I mean, it seems reasonable with all the research that we want done that, I mean, there's no hurry to get this done.
Right. Yeah, we'll see what I can get done and we'll see where it lies. It could theoretically be at the next one. It might get pushed back. I've got updates I can give you and. Let's do a motion before I give you that, but I've got other stuff in the hopper too, so
Okay,
unless you guys want to still discuss, I don't mean to. rush
right,
anymore.
are we, any more comments, considerations, things you'd like to have information when we revisit this? All right, we'll take a motion to bring this back with the requested information.
I move that we put this topic on the next agenda. Subsequent to staff being able to provide us with research and data that we've outlined tonight. That close enough?
Yeah, is there a second?
I support that motion.
All right, Charlie makes the motion, Rick does the second, roll call.
Just a second.
Make a note.
Okay.
Wilmot,
Yes.
Robson,
Yes,
Paul,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Meridian,
Yes.
McSweeney,
Yes.
Detmer,
Yes.
Buck.
Yes.
motion passes. Because of the late time. And because we're postponing. Looking at this. I'm hoping that public is willing to wait until the next meeting to. Share their issues. If not, then raise your hand. Okay. I would like to limit these to about 2 minutes for comments.
And please come fill this out too.
Right, and I need your name and address.
I think the council.
Can you tap the green on there, please? Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, my name is Albert Moss and I live at 510 Hillcrest. Glad to be here again. It's been nice knowing all you guys and really, I want to commend you. I mean, I know what the big picture is. And you're really trying to do a good job of getting more housing and things like that. So I think that's great. You made a wise decision. On the 15th of September. The city council apparently doesn't understand the wisdom of your decision. We'll talk about other things, but the protections are, what you have as tools was brought up. That should be in addition, our best protection for the neighborhood, for everybody in the district, or just the district, is the 33-foot height. All the issues go away. We're all happy if we keep 33 feet for 11 lots. There's 160 properties in those adjacent neighborhoods. 11 of those 11 lots. 3 of them are owned by a little town LLC. We pay taxes. They do too. I understand that. But we live here, we vote here. Finally, those protections, we don't need them, but those protections are important. And they should be in addition to, not instead of the 33-foot height allowance. The McIntoshes talk. They live right behind the American. There were site plans that were never followed. They went and tried to do something about the site plans and they said, there's nothing we can do. They don't have the money. So if you can't enforce the protections you have now, why are we talking about protections? I mean, you have the site plan, but if you can't enforce it, then, in 33 feet, there's nothing versus 25 feet. There's nothing they can do with that 8 feet in terms of giving us a whole lot more property density. We're not going to get more people to live in the zone. That's not a zone people live in. It's a zone people live in and people sleep in. That's all people do in that zone. Correct? As it is now, and everything's planned. So why do you need that extra feet to make it look like every other part of town? Well, that's not like every other part of town. It is where you see our beautiful city. And that's all I've ever talked about. For me, it is not all the nitpicking that we talked about. It is what we own, that precious view, that thing that makes us Petoskey. And you want to have 12 feet, take them off that view. You look at the pictures, I send you all pictures. You can do all the work he's talked about, but look at the pictures. You can see how the view goes down at all those places. I'll bring them, put them on poster boards if you want, but
Thank you.
please don't do this. But please, when you consider next time, consider all that. Thank you.
I'm Karen Verkerke. I had a very long speech at 11:04 preview. I had a very long speech prepared. I'm very upset right now. So what I'm going to do for my 2 minutes is I want you to look what I read upstairs every day and explain to me what you're going to do with the wall, what you're going to do with landscaping to prevent this from all these others. There's nothing you can do. Nothing. This is when it was built. That's it now. We've got new protection. There's no protection. So look at it for 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
I was giving you 2 minutes to look at the pictures. I'm Rochelle Martinez. I live at 1105 Preby. I'm one of the pictures here of the man watching me at breakfast. That was from across my house, and I live way across the street. So this really impacts the neighborhood. And to think that you're going to do that to our neighborhood for other people, that's really hard for me to think about. I'd like to be able to spare people that opportunity, having people join them for breakfast with with that view. I'll put it up there so you can see. I want to remind you that this was where the mission school was. The original Petoskey started 1852. And Petoskey started that mission school because he had a falling out with the Catholic Church. And they said that his sons needed to come back from Oberlin. I know the story. And he did not agree. So he petitioned the Presbyterians to build a mission school right here on that hill of that beautiful view, with that view in mind, because that view gives us peace. It gives everyone peace that comes there. I think of Forrest Gump in the beginning, where that feather came and settled down, and down here, where that calm comes. In my prior life, I was a public school teacher in Ann Arbor. I also was a professional harpist. And I had the opportunity to play thousands of weddings. I love weddings. And I had the opportunity to sit up front in the altar where they gave their vows. And truly, when 97% of the weddings I've played through the years, 50 years of performing, people really believed those vows. They really thought they'd be together forever. And they looked at each other and there was this energy, it was permeating through the room. They cared for one another and they really look out for each other. And it was really true. Much like when you hold your infant for the first time, and you look at their eyes, it's so precious and the little girl's lips, and that pure feeling, that feather, that down here, and when we're down here in that spirit, we can make good decisions and we come to calm and we have peace in our lives. I've also played a lot of hospice and memorial services, and that's such a blessing to be part of that because that's where we'll all be someday. And I've been when someone's held a hand and said, I'm sorry, I didn't have time. I'm sorry, I didn't stop after work. I'm sorry, I didn't come over and return your call. I was busy, but I love you. I love you. It's that same pure energy at that wedding where they did the vows, the same pure energy when you're holding that baby and looking at that little infant's eyes. That same energy we get from that feather floating down. And when we're down here, we have that peace. There isn't war, there's negotiations, and there's respect for one another down here in that peace. When we come up over that hill, we'll go, oh, it's that peace. Please don't take that peace away. Thank you.
Okay.
Kate Marshall, 1015 East Mitchell. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to bring up a little point. At the beginning of the meeting, Dr. Paul had a list of concerns that he thought the council needed to understand in terms of the initial vote of the planning commission. He was assured by all of you that though they wouldn't approve it, the addition for this meeting, it would be done at the end of this meeting because you would discuss those issues of the master plan. That hasn't happened. So having been on council myself for a long time, I can tell you the council often doesn't understand why decisions were reached. And I had a couple of people on council say to me, they never understood what the initial vote was about. And I think you've missed an opportunity to at least go back and clarify that for them. Thank you. Dr. Simon?
Yeah. Kate, we had decided that would be added to the minutes in this part. Yeah, for this meeting. Well, we might have them officially read it, but it will be included in the minutes.
I just think it's really important.
Yep.
So pretty behind the Apple Tree Hotel. What is 37 feet, just so you know. Here, it's 3 stories and 37 feet. So that is what it looks like. All right, and I agree with what Ted Paul was saying about the master plan. The master plan says that natural beauty is Petoskey's identity, and the city must strive to protect our view sheds. That's a pretty important view shed coming down that. That's the view of the city. It also states that some of the concerns about the master plan were maintaining the unique character of Petoskey. Petoskey is extremely unique. And I just feel like we're gonna lose that uniqueness. You alter that view and it's gone forever. It's not coming back. The master's plan also states, it says, there is no question that the topography of the city and the surrounding area provide views of Little Traverse Bay that create an important community resource. Residents place great importance on the views of the bays, as identified in many public surveys in the 2000 Blueprint Petoskey Master Plan process. The top two design principles that came out of the process was that what the waterfront was going to be enhanced as a community's most important asset. And that's good. It's great, the waterfront. You should be able to see the water from a lot of different areas besides just right up in the image also. And the other thing is they said that developmental policies and practices will protect views of the lake. This is that view. And it's like, are we the master plan or are we not? The master plan also says in the community mobility goals that there is a balance between the desire for public views of the Little Traverse Bay and the interests of private property owners. I feel like we are just overlooked completely in this process. I don't understand. You buy a piece of property, invest your life in it, and when this comes up, there's a huge public outcry. So they lower it back down, knowing they made a mistake. Now they want to raise it up again. It's like, this just seems so unfair to the property owners. We didn't do anything wrong. I never would have bought that property. And all those people that in the area would have, okay. All the people in the area would have bought the property. It is not fair to change the rules on them once they have made their purchase. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward? I can't see everybody.
The display.
So if you do want to come forward, come on up.
Are we still doing comment?
Yes.
Yeah, if you're, I actually have been letting you go 3 minutes, but.
Sorry.
No, I've been letting everybody go 3 minutes, so.
Ron Carl Redder from 1108 Freebie.
Can you repeat your name again?
Oh, Redder,
Thank you.
1108 Freebie. That's, I had to run off, but I don't know what's being covered. Yeah, to some extent, I feel like this is double jeopardy for us on in this neighborhood. With our decision, and now we're reviewing the decision. Listen, I think you guys are we're lucky we have you people. This is a tough thing that you're doing. You're facing all of us. So that's out for you guys. Listen, the thing I enjoyed the most tonight was the development down the Michael Block. You got these developers come in, they take great risk for a great reward. The risks are unimaginable, as imagined as well as unimaginable, but they're looking for great reward. Everybody's looking to increase their value, and I know the city of Petoskey is doing the same thing when they look at this this zone. Excuse me, I had to run out of here for something, but back. But now we're looking at redeveloping Spring Street and what is otherwise truly a neighborhood setting. And when you do that, you're talking about raising the density, and density changes everything. And I know you've got different things that you're hoping to do to help people like ourselves. All of that is wonderful on paper, but like ants in a house, it just has a way of taking on its own life when reality hits the road. You're going to have developers come in. They're going to develop something like we've had with the apple tree. You mentioned the apple tree. We're here because we know about the apple tree. That
is like with our neighborhood. The office building down the street, the bank. The apartment complex down the road, the old Tasty Freeze. We've lived with those. But when you're talking about a 3-story building, there's not going to be a fence big enough to go tall enough. You're looking at all these strange eyes looking in the neighborhood. For those people that don't, there's right next door. For other people who are in the neighborhood looking at their property values to a developer, great risk, great reward. To the people in the neighborhood, maybe not so much reward. It's like Dan's talking about. Where is this thing going to go for us? It's difficult to see. Mr. Paul, you mentioned the homes. That's just part of it. You see, it's the way cigarette boats get parked in front of your house over here on the side street. And then I'm looking at, you mentioned 3-story buildings and we keep that up a good plan, but we have a project height levels. But I'm going to be looking at a skyline, possible skyline, right flat across. They're not going to have those differences if they're all 3 stories. Anyway, we've got a bunch of responsible people coming in here from the east neighborhood. Asking you, great place to live. We're happy to be part of it. We're looking for the protection that we thought we would be afraid of.
Thank you.
Hello, Matthew Fettig, 906 Michigan Street. I was here for the first discussion and I'm very sympathetic to the residents and their plight with the hotels. It certainly makes sense that those sort of hotels are not good neighbors, and adding an extra floor of not good neighbors would make their situation worse. The question I would have is, do we have to see this as a building height thing, or do we have to see it as a use case thing? Would a 3-story condo or apartments be a worse neighbor than a 2-story hotel? I'm not sure. That's kind of a question I'm wondering from you guys. Like, if the 3-story height was allowed for residential use, long-term residential use versus for short-term hotel stays, would that be a better neighbor? I would think it would, and I think that the demand, the need in our area is more for housing than it is for hotel rooms. So I don't see why it has to be one or the other. Why you have to say it can be it's either 3 stories and it could be a hotel or a residential, or has to be 2 stories and hotel or residential. Why can't you say it can be 3 stories if it's a condo versus it can only be 2 stories as a hotel? Or even better, say you can only have a certain number of hotel rooms per acre or whatever. So, so you can make it 3 stories, but it's only, it's pushed up to one side instead of spread out over the whole thing. With a smaller density of units per acre. It seems like that could make sense too. Just potential ideas.
Anybody else? Okay. So I'll call end of public comment. The next order on our agenda is public comment for things not on the agenda. So is there anybody who had a comment on anything that's not on the agenda? All right, we'll move on to commissioner comments. Oh, before we do that, do you want Ted to do an official reading of what he's going to submit, his comments for the minutes? Should he read them again?
Didn't I? Yeah, I think I read it already.
Yeah.
How many much that?
All right, I just want to confirm that's going to get in the minutes. All right, commissioner comments.
I want to commend our fine neighbors for their perseverance and patience as we moved through our agenda tonight. It took a lot of stamina, and we appreciate having you here and really do feel for the issues that you have.
So has anyone participated in the housing, the first event that was yesterday?
I did, and it was excellent. And next Wednesday will be based on the zoning toolkit. It will be a 2-hour review of the new zoning toolkit, which I think will be an indispensable value to us as a commission. I mean, we have copies of the written toolkit. I don't know how many people have managed their way through it yet, but to have it spoon fed to us will be a wonderful gift, and recordings of are being taken and will be available for every member. That Zach will make those available too. So I recommend it highly. I'm looking forward to next Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 1.
Okay. Ted, did you want to summarize the 118 webinar?
What we just were talking about?
Mhm.
That was really good. It was a lot of census, a lot of data. Census projections, things like that. How to look at your housing situation. It got a little complicated. But they were showing an analysis of a community versus trends in the state and the whole country. And then you could pull out different factors and try to explain and figure out if you varied why it was happening. It was a way to refine looking at the bigger housing picture into your specific needs, albeit a little bit complex and data driven.
It was definitely data driven, and furthermore, I pulled this little guy out afterwards because I thought, did we do that for Living Petoskey? And it's surprising how many of those actual data feeds were in this previous report. So for those of you who participated in this before, my hat is once again off to you because it's a great document. But there were also some good ideas for the next review of the strategy of the of the master plan.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Okay, any other comments?
I had a question about our typical agenda. My comment is a question about a typical agenda. Is there a point like, okay, we have roll call, we have approval of minutes, we have new business, old business. I do attend the Mackinac Island, City of Mackinac Island Planning Commission meetings and Historic District Commission meetings often. And they have a point there called adoption of agenda. It's a standard step that they go through each time. And like in a case like this, where these folks have had to sit here all night to get to their point, and I'm not sure how the agenda gets structured. I guess, new business always comes before old business and that sort of thing. But if we had an item called adoption of agenda, could we jump the last topic to be the first topic? So that, people wouldn't have to sit here all night long. I don't know, that's just a thought I had.
We have rearranged agendas in the past. So we could put this official step in adoption of agenda, but I know that we've had times where we put something, clearly people are there for one thing, so we put that at the beginning of the agenda. Ted?
And I did want to make the comment, my understanding, I'm quite sure what we did on city council. I'm quite sure what Robert's rules will say, old business comes first. You start to try and work on the things you've been working on. And then you have new business items, and unfortunately, potentially, sometimes you might not get to some new business, but.
Well, I think that part of the.
So I was confused about that.
Right, but we had two people presenting. And generally, we want that to be
Right.
first.
No, in terms of old and new business, my understanding was old comes before new. Normally presentations occur before both of those things.
Right, I guess I just.
So those people don't have to wait around.
Right.
Right.
So Rick, your point, at the beginning of the meeting, you'd like to review the agenda order? Is that the point? Or are you saying that we should establish the agenda now for the next meeting?
No, it's typically at least how it happens, where I've attended these meetings, they talk about today's agenda. Is there additional correspondence that should be read? Are there additional committee reports that should be stated that have come in since the, written agenda was sent out or something? Or is there some new topic that should be added? And anything that involves public participation, of course, you can't add a new topic because there hasn't been public notice of that given. So it wouldn't be anything like that.
Right.
But
I did consider moving that to the front of the agenda, but the thing is, that it was scheduled at the end, and I didn't want people who planned to come but figured I don't have to go till later. If we had done it at the beginning, then those people wouldn't have been able to participate. So just, I think most people were here already.
yeah,
But I know certainly I've done it where I have something specific I want to know about. I see where it is on the agenda. I may not choose to go to the beginning of the meeting. So,
okay, well, just a thought.
any other comments? All right. Updates. Oh, I was going to ask about the January 30th training.
I'll start out with that one. So on January 30th, and I sent that out to you guys, correct?
Just a notice that it would happen.
Okay. So on that agenda, that'll be a joint meeting with the city council. It'll be a short training session, an ethics training from city attorney staff. I think it's supposed to be roughly 30 minutes. We'll see how that goes. So that'll be the front portion. The back portion is going to be a discussion on the Darling lot. Future of that, of what that's
Again,
going to be.
okay.
Well, hopefully for the last time. Hopefully for the last.
Good.
Is there some proposal or just get people on the same page or?
Staff needs a direction on which way to go on that. We've heard parking deck, we've heard mixed use, we've heard leave it. We need direction on that because there's no sense in, especially running a developer up to put in any work on it if it's not something that they're interested in, they can't make the numbers work. That's not what they do. So if we have direction, we can really make something happen there. Or at least in that direction.
You'll be providing us with enough information that we can make a judgment.
I'm not bringing a drawing to you, if that's what you're,
Say it.
I don't plan on bringing a drawing. This is very much open in the air. We've heard it's gonna be a parking deck. We've heard leave it. We've heard,
Will you list out in the agenda what things have been considered in the past?
Options.
So we know what has, not everybody here has been paying attention or been around for it, for that evolution of ideas.
I would argue it's a blank slate. I mean, we need to think about what we're doing and not, what happened in the past happened in the past. We need to make a decision for who's in front of us today.
With the planning commission, I just wondering, city council's members have had strong feelings on that for sure in the past. Will they really want to do that more themselves? Because I think in the previous discussion, I don't know that the planning commission was involved. I thought council had.
We thought it was important because ultimately it's going to come to you guys first. If you have kind of the direction from city council, you can kind of tailor your parameters on what that might look like based on what they had kind of laid out.
Well, if we're gonna have a mudslinging contest, why not add the DMV to it too? I mean, don't they have?
We have emergency requirements to have a joint meeting with planning commission and city council. So anyone else is welcome to come, but on paper, this is a planning commission, city council. DMV, I sure hope shows up. I know they have a lot of input. There's parking committee. There's a lot of other entities. But this is still baseline discussion.
I mean, a lot of that discussion often centers on the financial realities and.
We can't pitch something if we don't know what we want.
So this is trying to narrow down what's favored,
Correct.
so, something that you want to know that we can support it.
Right.
I don't have a strong, or like, I don't want to make this into a long debate or drag the conversation on, but I have strong opinions about this from my time on the downtown management board. Strongly in that if we were to look at the prior feasibilities, prior cost estimates of what can be done. And we looked at the cost compared to the net parking that's gained on any type of a structure. It'd be evident that you could really only do parking there. And so then and I think that changes the whole conversation. But I let everyone else can come to their own conclusions, but I think if you could provide links or some of those prior, I don't remember the exact years I was on there that we paid a consultant to actually do drawings, designs, and budgets, which are now all outdated.
Well, and DMV did it more than once.
Yes.
They came up with multiple.
I haven't been keeping track, but I think I've heard 6 or 7 different times this has been looked at for different things.
So Doug, you believe that parking only is the most feasible? Because my understanding was some people tried to throw some condos in there to make it more cost effective, but then it took out some parking.
Right. And so there's been all kinds. There was at one point a grocery store, you may recall, on the first level. And what happens is by the time you do setbacks, the structure for the walls, the ramps to allow for traffic, you lose parking. So just because you go up a level, doesn't mean you double the parking.
Right.
You barely make an impact. And so to make a significant improvement in parking, you really have to take it to the current maximum allowable height and have nothing but parking there.
Because the need was for parking. Not necessarily a grocery store.
And if you do anything else, you take away from the parking. And so in the end, you've actually created more need for parking without increasing the net number of parking spaces. Let alone the cost of adding those net parking spaces.
So it's a simple discussion.
In my mind, I think if you saw the financial side of it and the drawings, the net number, a rational opinion would come to that same conclusion.
Right. I agree.
Okay.
So,
I know.
I've been working on the short-term rental ordinance. I've gone back and forth with the attorneys on that, so we're still dialing that in. I'm not sure when I'll get more to come to you guys. It could be next time. I'm hopeful. But hopefully we'll get that coming up quickly. I would hope before things really kick off in the
So again, so I understand. So we didn't have a short-term rental.
It was covered under the zoning code.
Under just like hotels or
Correct.
yeah. But now they thought it would be better to have one.
We could have a cap at this point. We don't have a cap.
Okay.
Zoning can't do that. A separate ordinance can.
Okay.
That's a big factor of it, but we have a lot of other issues we're piling in there, so.
So you're saying that this will be like the sign ordinance, it will be a separate ordinance. It'll be its own ordinance, okay.
Yep. That's my next item is I've also been working with city attorneys on the sign ordinance. I've given them my preliminary thoughts and we've gone back and forth on the minutia of that and how we're going. So that one will certainly be done. My hope is before November, well before November. Big picture.
What is your big picture assessment of what is the change that's needed?
Primarily, it's focusing on those political signs and temporary signs and how we treat those and what's the future of those going to look like.
Understood that that's the ultimate goal, but didn't you also mention at some point in a previous update that the entire ordinance needs to be rewritten because it's not defensible in court as a use law now?
Primarily because of those factors. And there's been some other small tweaks elsewhere, but that's the bulk of it. Business and non-business signage, off-premise signage. I was already in it, so I started making comments and said, we're gonna handle this now because why wouldn't we? The bulk of it though is dealing with that political signage, how that's treated in our ordinance. And what's gonna protect the city. And then when it comes to you guys, we'll have, we'll have the protection, so then it becomes, okay, size, number, things like that, height. That's where, sign committee will come in, you guys come in, we'll keep it moving. But my main goal being, if there's ever an issue, we have a leg to stand on in court.
I'm curious to know if there was a desire to have a group session next Wednesday versus.
Charlie,
I'm
you're on my next one.
I don't need to be a spoiler.
You're saying for the housing training?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if there was a desire to do the housing training in-house here, and we can put it on the screen here, we can absolutely do that.
What time is it's?
11
It's 11 to 1.
on Wednesday.
Oh, so it's a daytime.
Yep. Otherwise, you guys will be
and-
getting the digital recordings. When I get them, I'll pass them out.
It's 3 Wednesdays.
But if you guys want, if anybody wanted to see it live action, let me know, we can make that work.
Did you just say that we would have access to recordings of those?
Yes, I'm not sure when they're gonna give them to me, but as soon as I get them, I'm gonna ship them out to you
She
guys.
stated in the presentation that it would be several days later because she needed to edit them and clean them up.
Yeah.
But it should be fairly prompt.
Okay, perfect.
It was worthwhile, wasn't it, Ted?
Yeah, I'm looking forward more to the next session. This was a little bit
Well,
dated.
because it was about master planning, it didn't feel that relevant to our particular circumstances.
We had just finished it, yeah.
We're done with updates.
Okay, so, okay,
Was everybody who changes card?
Let's,
I have.
let's call the meeting first. All
oh, okay,
right,
so, meeting's adjourned.
3.5 hours later.
Are you a person?